that it's very important food production, and Brazil is one of the world's largest food producers, and we're also one of the most dependent on fertilizer imports. When you look at something that is so important to food production on a global level, we also have China that imports 10% of its fertilizers. The US imports 44%. India imports 34%. I think it's 34. And Brazil that imports almost 90%. So this balance needs to be better, uh, needs to be more equitable. And recently, we saw ourselves threatened through the war between Ukraine and Russia that brought a certain hiccup to us, to our internal market, due to the restrictions that we have in that sense. And Brazil intends to increase grain and meat production, and fertilizers are within the strategy to ensuring this is possible and to avoid food insecurity in Brazil and other countries. Our agribusiness brings to Brazil about the uranium. It's a state monopoly. We do not work with uranium. Our contribution here is it's part of a global strategy today for decarbonization. In COP28, it was pointed out that over 20 countries are going to need to increase their clean energy generation to be able to achieve net zero throughout the next years until 2050. In the Brazilian scenario, Brazil now has Angra 1 and 2. It intends to build Angra 3, but it is still dependent on the import of uranium for these operations. And this project is able to not only meet the need that Brazil has in that sense, but also provide Angra 1, 2, and 3 times over. So Brazil will now be an exporter of this fuel to other countries. And talking a little bit about Galvani, and then I'll come back to Project Santa Quitéria. Galvani is a Brazilian business that has great pride, and we have participations in Bahia, Ceará, Paraíba, and we supply the north and northeastern parts of Brazil. It's a company with over 50 years in the fertilizer industry. It has implemented several developments. It's fully Brazilian and completely verticalized in north and northeast, from the mine to the end consumer. So this project produces 1,050 and is able of supplying 25% of the northeast demand, 220 phosphate bicalcium phosphate, 50% of the northeast demand, and 2.3 kilotons a year of uranium concentrate, which eliminates the import and allows the possibility of export. As I said, it can supply Angra 1, 2, 3 times over. So the uranium produced and converted into energy, we're talking about something near 83,000 gigawatts of energy. So it's something very significant with the capacity of, hypothetically, replacing less noble sources of energy like mineral coal with an economy of over 70 million tons of CO2 per year throughout the shelf life of this product, which is 10 to 20 years. So this project is developed by Galvani and the Brazilian nuclear industry. Galvani comes into this competition because its specialty is exactly separating phosphate from other elements. So we keep the phosphated components, and uranium goes to the state through the Brazilian nuclear industry. So the project, it will deliver the end products. but it also has great technological innovations as it benefits these products. It's a technology that is very specific where you no longer use, for example, waste dams. We have a project with this setup, and it will be very much similar to the cement industry. From then on, the process comes back to the fertilizer plant, as it usually does, in order to produce these products. And there we will have some innovation so that we can fully extract the phosphate and the uranium and other elements that should not be present either in the phosphate or the uranium. You can see a few images here, a few volumes, numbers of the project. We are currently under licensing, in the licensing process, and we intend to be fully operational by 2028, 2029. Technological innovations were rethought over the years, and in this process, we rethought about processes that could be further developed, like we now have a cogeneration of energy that is significantly high, so we're able to collect the CO2 and generate energy. We also focus on the decrease of the use of water, especially when we talk about the semi-arid where we are currently located. That is very important. And a significant decrease in vegetation suppression. And now, almost at the end of my presentation, I would like to highlight a work done by the Observatory of Industries of Ceará that can reveal a little bit of the positive impact of this project, generation of jobs and gross domestic product, and the thousands of employments and dynamics that are brought to the territory where this project is being implemented. And the FIAC Observatory revealed these numbers very well, including the Santa Quitéria GDP increase in about 10 times and 4 times across the entire region. So this is a project that is very important to Brazil and to the world. When we talk about decarbonization, not only the product that is being produced, but the potential energy that will be produced, this places the project at a very different level from others that are similar. An important contribution to the national fertilizer plan to decrease the dependence on imports, especially strengthening agriculture in North and Northeast regions. Galvani produces a customized product. In addition to being fully Brazilian, 100%, we also produce what the producers need. So when you import the fertilizer, and this is no criticism to those who do this, they are also important. But we customize this for the producers. So exactly what that property, that land needs, we are able to increase productivity without losing elements that are necessary to that land specifically. And also independence from the import of uranium for Brazil. So I am available for any questions, debates, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event. Thank you. Thank you. You were perfect in your time. You brought us such important messages, especially when you talked about the reduction of the dependence on imported fertilizers. You brought a number that is very well known, but it's also important to reinforce that we import 90% of fertilizers used in Brazil, of which 27% of our GDP depends, which is the agribusiness. So there's an idiosyncrasy there that we can decrease, and that was one of your messages. I'm going to ask now that Guilherme Ricci, director of White Martins, to come up here and give his presentation. He is the Business and Clean Energy Director at White Martins. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Guilherme Risi. I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of this harder segments, those that are more difficult to decrease CO2 emissions, and how white machines can help companies or segments to decrease and improve their processes and reduce emissions. Beginning, since hydrogen is going to have a fundamental role in the energy transition and decarbonization, what is our experience with hydrogen? Well, we're a company from the Lindy Group. We have been operating with hydrogen for over 40 years, a number of decades with experience in the production, processing, liquefaction. We have plenty of plants that work with this, maintenance, and distribution of hydrogen. So White Martins is fully prepared for production of hydrogen throughout its entire route from the beginning and electrolysis until delivering it as ammonia or hydrogen or other renewable byproducts. We have electrolysis. Obviously, today, around the world, most hydrogen produced is still gray hydrogen from fossil fuels, but I'm going to show you at the end of the presentation a few plants, a few green hydrogen plants that are already operational around the world, and others to come in the next 2-3 years. Here on the left, we have a very well-established hydrogen operation, not only in North America and Europe, but also South America. Our structure is a matrix system. We implement hydrogen in all countries here in South America. We have plants in Chile, Peru, Brazil, obviously, Argentina, and they are pretty big. We've had in 2022 the first green hydrogen plant that was certified in Brazil, operating in Pernambuco with the DUV certification. We brought a certification team from Germany here. So it is within the international standards for the acceptance of renewable hydrogen. So yes, we already have green hydrogen in production and in development here in Brazil. And it is geared towards a client from the food production sector. Talking a little bit about processes, we are able to work with all types, and here we move towards a little bit of the fertilizing industry. We work with gray ammonia, blue ammonia, and green ammonia, different classifications. In gray ammonia, the first case here, preferentially in countries that most produce it nowadays, when you have a natural gas cost that is too low, you don't have the benefit of credits and fees. Moving on to blue ammonia, especially in North America, a good part of our new projects are already in blue ammonia. We have a project that is already announced with investments from Lindy alone in the amount of 200 million. Together with OCI, a fertilizer production company, where you have to capture the emitted CO2, and that's an option for countries that still have a high production based on natural gas and whose natural gas is at a very low cost. We believe that what will prevail in the future are especially the projects here in this region, which is green ammonia. We can install electrolysis, promote the production of ammonia, and hydrogen, which is the head of production. So both green ammonia and blue ammonia will have their due space. Some countries will accept blue ammonia, others won't. We can already observe that in Europe there is a preference, medium and long term, for green ammonia. And that's what we understand that Brazil is going to bet on in its next projects. A little bit here about the decarbonization in the steel industry. Decarbonization is not just green hydrogen. In Lean G at White Martins, we work with decarbonization processes in several stages. So whatever color, the color of hydrogen, the ammonia plants with CO2 capture, we are able to store. In the US, we have hydrogen storage in caves. We have a hydrogen hub with over 1,000 kilometers of pipelines so that we can balance out the clients. And then we have the CO2 capture projects, what are also going to assist those who already operate with polluted emissions. This is very well orchestrated by LeanG in a way that you can capture your CO2, purify it, and insert it under the earth or use it to generate other products. And we have technologies that help decarbonize steel specifically. We are available to present this individually, each one of these processes. A lot of them have over 2 decades in operation in Brazil and the world with practical results of decarbonization, reducing for our steel clients or clients in the steel industry, helping them decrease a good part a significant part of their CO2 emissions. And we also have in the world steel production plants, like in Switzerland, where we insert green hydrogen. We have here a case of CO2 capture at a cement industry in Germany, decreasing the CO2 emissions, and we will also have a project starting this year in Niagara Falls of 35 megawatts and one in Cleveland in a steel industry also involving hydrogen. And all of these are already in operation. And a few cases in Brazil, Toyota, which you saw coming in here, hydrogen that has been used in tests here in Brazil, and we announced in 2 months the new plant in the state of São Paulo, a 5-megawatt plant in Jacareí to meet the local market needs, and a few projects here, always in partnership, so that we can install green ammonia and methanol. So we have knowledge, expertise, and know-how to be able to assist our clients in their decarbonization paths and to bring the new reality of green fuels to Brazil. Thank you very much. Thank you, Guilherme. You also did not go over your time, exceed your time. You brought some important news, actually a few. Something that we hear a lot about is transport liquefaction, invasing, and hydrogen has always been around, and we've always consumed it and transported it. So it's not exactly a technological challenge for the future. What I'm going to do now is call on Rodrigo Santana, Director of Operations and Business Development at Atlas Agrofertilizantes, so he can present to us, so he can bring his presentation. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet you today here at this FIEC event. I would like to thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Constantino. Thank you, Monica, for the invitation of being here today and being able to debate with these panelists about the opportunities that Brazil brings in these very significant industries. And here I'm going to bring our specific case and also show the potential that exists here in Brazil, specifically speaking about green fertilizers. I would like to thank my colleague for having presented 50% of what I had to say. Thank you so much. So I'm really going to focus on hydrogenated fertilizer since he already explained the market so well. Well, who is Atlas Agro? It's a Swiss company founded less than 3 years ago by high executives of the fertilizer industry. Basically, it's a company that is 3 years old with over 20 years of experience, where we have led the most important fertilizer companies in the world. The company was created with a very clear objective to decarbonize the industry, the fertilizer industry. The hydrogenated fertilizer industry I'm going to talk about a little bit more, but it's responsible for 2% of global CO2 emissions. It's one of those very hard industries, but we believe we have the solution. It's a technological solution in a business model that will make this technology and business scalable, so that we can help in this ambitious goal that the world has to reduce and decarbonize the entire world. Our headquarters are in Zurich in Switzerland. Our business office is in Spain, Madrid, and we have our two first projects announced. Others will come, but we have our first announced project was in the United States, in the West Coast, at Pacific Northwest, where we have the first plant that has already wrapped up its engineering studies, and we will be starting the final investment cycle so that we can begin it still this year. Here we have one in Uberaba, in the Minas Triangle. It has a similar size to that of the U.S. It's a project that will produce over 5 million tons of hydrogenized fertilizers yearly. Engineering has wrapped up, and we are now moving on to the second stage, and that I will comment in detail the next steps of this project further on. Here on the right, just so we can show a little bit more, these are the quantity of projects that our team has already been in charge of. We have built over 40 hydrogenized fertilizer industries, and also for other kinds of fertilizers. So our core business is production of fertilizer plants. We are not a sustainable energy business. We are not a green hydrogen business. We are a fertilizer business. Just to bring a little bit more of tangibility, I really like to bring this presentation because sometimes carbon seems so far away from our reality, but it is actually here. It seems untouchable, unachievable, and I believe that a few of you here have already experimented this feeling when we had coffee after lunch. Just so you have an idea, 1 kilo of coffee has almost 750 grams of CO2, and that is simply from hydrogenated fertilizers. So that can be extended to the clothes that we wear that are made of cotton, the chocolate that we eat every day. Basically, everything in agriculture and most of the worldwide commodities consume a lot of hydrogenated fertilizers and are one of the biggest emitters of CO2 in the atmosphere. Here we can see a bit of the size of the industry where we will be acting, performing. The industry issues a little bit less than 1 billion CO2, which places it at the same level of worldwide aviation. And of course, this comes due to the use of fossil-based products, and that's what we're going to do differently. From the moment that we decided to decarbonize the industry, there were several alternatives or technological routes, and we chose electrolysis. Our colleague also commented on the difficulties in Brazil regarding hydrogenated fertilizer production. Brazil imports about 85% of its fertilizers, and when we're talking about phosphate, hydrogen, and potassium, but when we're talking about nitrogenated fertilizers, this number goes up. 95% of what is consumed today in the Brazilian agribusiness, one of the biggest food producers worldwide, is based on on nitrogenated fertilizers. And related to this dependence, that's what our slide is showing. There's a huge lead time for these fertilizers to arrive to agriculture business owners. And here in Brazil, in the ports, roads, everything, it's a very long time. It's up to 90 days. For those who know the fields a little bit more or have worked directly with farmers, the thing we hear the most is the delay in delivery of the fertilizers. And that is a huge problem for farmers because when it's raining, they need to apply this fertilizer at a specific time. So imagine if you didn't have to bring the fertilizer from somewhere across the world. Now you can access it from a local producer. So that's what we're talking about, adding value to farmers and circumventing these difficulties. So what we're going to do is take nitrogenated fertilizers based on green hydrogen and reduce emissions in industrial production to practically zero. More than 80%. What we're going to do different is a different feedstock. So instead of using hydrogen that comes from natural gas, which is a hydrocarbonate, you take hydrogen and you release a huge amount of carbon to the atmosphere. So we're going to use water, H2O, completely clean, carbon-free, no danger of released emissions, and that's what we're going to use. I also like to, this illustration here is one of my favorite ones. It's well known by those in the world of green hydrogen. There's a graph where the hydrogen ladder is shown, and you can see it here. Letter A is where green hydrogen industries are included very quickly. And you see others here that are in the hype and might have the adherence expected. Here on top, you have fertilizers at letter A. There's no actual option for decarbonizing if you do not include nitrogenated fertilizers. We don't know the speed, but it will happen. There's no alternative, and that's what we are proposing to be a leader in this transition for low carbon nitrogenated fertilizers. One of the largest issues for Brazil not having a nitrogenated fertilizer is because Brazil does not have competitive natural gas. But there's also an issue when we talk about new fertilizer plants. We show a little bit of these pipeline matrix. When you look at this image to the left, this is where pipelines exist in Brazil currently. We have a little bit more than 9,000 kilometers of pipelines, and basically they're along the coast. And when you look at the right, it is the energy, the electricity matrix, the integrated electricity matrix of Brazil. Roraima alone has more than 150,000 kilometers. And what does this mean? What are the implications? That even if you do have access to natural gas, which is an alternative that still brings a high emission of carbon, it requires a huge investment. At the same time, something that Brazil has been doing for a long time is the interconnection. So I can have my plant at Uberaba, and the energy source might be coming from the northeast, or a plant that is in Goiás, or in Maranhão, or in Ceará. And with this interconnected network, we can distribute energy to Brazil as a whole, which makes Brazil very interesting for the fertilizing industry. And finally, on the left, you can see the long trip made by fertilizers here in Uberaba, the Minas Triangle. It will not be distributed to Brazil as a whole. It will be distributed regionally. This plant will produce 500,000 tons. And this is responsible for approximately only 4% of the national demand for fertilizers, for nitrogenized fertilizers. So look at the size of the opportunity that exists here in Brazil. I'm ending, Fernanda. I swear, I swear. And this is what we're going to do. But we didn't stay just at the technological solution. What we did when the company was established a few years back, we studied for over a year all possible optimization points within the nitrogenated fertilizer production process. So we are trying to make this more competitive. So what am I talking about here? The reduction of capex and opex. We combine electrolysis and fertilizer production, and we're going to use these and have important, significant synergies that are going to be fundamental to continue this project. Two of these improvements we have already requested a patent for in the United States and are awaiting feedback from that process. And what is the impact of this for rural producers? We have here the main agricultural commodities: coffee, oranges, corn. The number you see is the percentage of carbon that comes from nitrogenated fertilizers. So today, Brazilian coffee, a huge percentage of carbon emissions comes from nitrogenated fertilizers. When we reduce the carbon there existent, we also reduce the emissions, and that's what the producers are going to do. It's plug and play. One day they stop using fossil fertilizers, the next day they begin using green fertilizers. So our project, what is it like? We just finished the engineering part 2-3 months ago, and now we're preparing for the executive project that precedes construction, which is obviously the largest part of the project prior to construction. And we invited several consortiums of several parts of the world: Asia, Africa, Brazil. Today we have 2 hired consortiums working in the engineering, and we are now moving on to the second step or phase in the next months. This is the last slide, and I talked a little bit about the size of this opportunity. And of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about our project, the first green nitrogenated fertilizer project here in Brazil. We don't want to stop in Uberaba, and Ceará might have a lot to do with this in the next steps, because this chart right here shows the size of the demand of nitrogenated fertilizers today. In 2020, Brazil consumed 20 million tons of nitrogenated fertilizers. Our plant will produce 500,000 tons. According to Fertilizer National Plan, in 2040, this will reach 2 million. 2050, even more. I was talking to a colleague before beginning this panel and said, just to follow up with the growth of Brazilian agribusiness, it's like Atlas Agro had to build a plant the size of the one that we have every year and a half, just so we can follow and meet the needs of the growing agribusiness. So it's a huge opportunity, and Ceará is very well located. The northeastern region today consumes 1.5 million nitrogenated fertilizers each year, and obviously when we're talking about low carbon fertilizers, I see Ceará as being very well located for the next steps of the next nitrogenated fertilizer projects. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Excellent opportunities you've brought to us, and also the data. We always think about greenhouse effect gases and emissions, And we don't remember how small things in our daily lives are affected by us and how important it is to bring society to the debate. So when you talk about energy transition, that is a problem, an issue that involves everyone, the common citizens, and it involves us as individual when we have power outages, when we have other issues. It's as important as paying your bills on time. It's a problem that needs to bring society in for the debate. We need to make society aware of these solutions that we have for decarbonization and decreasing carbon content. I'm going to call Sérgio de Marcelo Mauricio, CEO of Cimento Apodi. Sérgio, please, you have 10 minutes. Good afternoon to all of those present. Thank you, Fernanda, for the opportunity. Thank you, FIEC, for organizing such an important event and giving me this challenge of talking in 10 minutes about something so complicated as decarbonizing the sectors that we're talking about. Cement is one of these sectors that is hard to decarbonize for a number of reasons. So I'm going to talk really quickly about who Apogee is, just so you get to know it, the challenges of the sector, the initiatives of the sector, and what we're doing within Apogee to contribute so that we have a greener, a less carbon emitting product. Apogee is a very modern company. It's a company with 13 years of existence. It's pretty young, not as much as Atlas, that is only 3 years old, but 13 years is a pretty early age. It's a genuine company from Ceará. It began in Quixeré and also in Pecém. So two plants that provide the cement are from Ceará. We now have 3 units in the total between concrete and cement production, and we have also announced we have over 3,500 clients of many natures. It's a product that is much more present in our life than we care to remember. Concrete is the second most produced product and consumed product in the world. It only loses to water. If we think about here where we are, there's concrete everywhere. Underneath you, to the sides and above, in the streets, in construction, in hospitals, in schools. And today we cannot live without the construction of this infrastructure that allows us our modern life. But when we look at carbon emissions, it is a sector that emits a lot. And this graph that I'm showing you here, this is data from the Climate Observatory. It changes from one country to another, from one year to another. This pertains to our Brazilian reality, where the industry in general generates 10% of emissions, CO2 emissions. And within these 10%, 2.3 are emitted by the cement industry. In general, 6 or 7% for cement. It depends on the balance of different segments in different countries. And that's exactly why we need to understand where the CO2 comes from. A lot of sectors think about fuel consumption, and cement production does consume a lot of that. 62% of Apogee's cost today is energy, between electric energy and fuels, which are mostly fossil fuels. Because in the heating process, we work with ovens that work at very high temperatures, and we need a lot of energy to do that. But the great villain is transforming CaCO3 to CaO and CO2. And 2/3 of the CO2 emissions come exactly from this chemical transformative process. So what can we do? The cement industry projected here in Brazil made a projection and created a roadmap to reach zero emissions in 2050. The market continues growing, but the emissions have to go down. And several actions were determined, as you can see, among constructive processes, clinker. These are the percentages that we understood will contribute to reach this net zero. A national roadmap was created that is followed by all cement industries, and they are working strongly to decrease emissions. And we have this chart right here. What are we working with within Apogee. Constructive methods, optimizing projects to decrease the emission of CO2 at work sites. If you are able to decrease the thickness, you consume less product, you issue less CO2. So there are CO2 emission parameters that are being reviewed year after year after year in the intention of decreasing. I was almost happy when I saw how much coffee emits per kilo because they actually emit more than cement, but then I remembered how much coffee we actually drink every day. And when we look at the consumption of cement, the consumption of concrete going up, that is the great difficulty of our sector, the absolute emissions of the construction industry as a whole. And at Apogee, what we've been developing, I'm going to give a few examples of some actions that were developed over the last few years and will continue to be so over the next years. Reduction in cement consumption. Usually you have cement trucks where cement is produced. You've probably complained in traffic due to these trucks, and they use a lot of fuel. If you produce the same cement at a central, you don't use the fuel, you diminish this expense and the emissions. You consume less fossil fuels, so you reduce your CO2 emissions. You also don't have rework, you have less losses, and we replaced our entire cement truck fleet for lighter trucks that increase transport capacity in up to 20% in day-to-day activities. So you consume less fuel, less energy, you optimize your logistics, which is also one of the villains. We also launched 3 years ago, more or less, Apogee Expert, which is a reference center for the development of of technology for concrete. It helps develop products, including high-performance products for construction, for skyscrapers that we have increasingly been seeing here in Ceará. We also have an innovation hub for construction in partnership with USP and others, exactly to develop products that decrease the use of cement and to improve energy consumption and quality standards in the cement industry. We developed concretes, high and ultra high performance concretes. So these are concretes that allow for a smaller consumption. So you take a pillar and you decrease what is used there, you decrease the use of cement, and evidently construction becomes cheaper because it's more accessible. We have supported structural projects because some of these technologies are not well known to all constructors within civil construction. So it's important to go to the market to train everyone involved so that they can know how to best use these products and contribute to smaller emissions. We are the only cement company that is currently using what we call BSSF, our friends here from ArcelorMittal, as an additive in our concrete production. It's an environmental passive of the steel industry. It's a byproduct or residue that comes from the steel industry, and we are making it into an input to help with concrete. In other words, if we continue working on all of these reductions, the same cement that has 33 NPA of resistance, that generated 850 kilos of CO2, you would be able to reduce that to 5, a reduction of 84% using the technologies to be implemented. Of course, we're not yet capable of using the cement in everything that is built, but we do believe in restructuring products and construction chains to be able to do this. And the clinker that is placed in the cement would also diminish the use of fossil fuels. So we have several types of cements with additives and several materials that we have been developing over time. The journey never ends. There is always more to be produced, and all of these additives decrease the CO2 emissions. Co-processing, we use residues as substitutes for traditional fuels, contributing to the preservation of natural resources. Of course, there's still the challenge of fundamentally consuming the residue that we generate, like waste and wastewater, and we have been working in favor of that as well. Several biomasses that are thrown out and that we are able to reuse. We also implemented in the last few months 2 production units for hydrogen within our plants. So it's a traditional electrolysis process separating oxygen from hydrogen, and both are applied in our ovens, increasing the use of residue and waste from other industries, increasing the capacity of our ovens and diminishing emissions. Oops, I went back, sorry. Other contributions, reduction in the consumption of electric energy, application of artificial intelligence. Electric energy, our Quixere plant is the only one that has a system of co-generating electric energy, and through a vapor turbine provides energy that meets 35% of the plant's needs. We are also concluding now in October of this year our first solar plant that will complement our energy production, and with that we'll have about 50% self-sufficiency in electric energy in a renewable way without needing to use fossil fuels. Artificial intelligence, modern systems that were implemented in our plant, and that's one of the advantages of having a new plant. This leads to the decrease in electric energy use, the use of water, fossil fuels. Water, which we're not talking about, but is a very scarce resource in our region. There's no need even to touch on that, everybody knows. And there are other contributions. The last category is how do you capture this carbon for storage or use? Our colleague talked about a partnership that is, we have a partnership in our next chapters that is, I'm going to talk about in a few moments. Today we consume about 1.5% of our matrix in sludge, and we intend to reach 7%. And finally, we never stop seeking innovations. Carbon Cure is exactly the CO2 injection system that we're working in partnership with Linji to inject in concrete, so it's a way of capturing. There's the development of the super resistant concretes with synthetic and steel fibers that will seeking new materials, partnerships with UFC and others to use other elements as inputs. CDRU is exactly taking the waste produced by the community and burning that in our ovens, in addition to other sustainable fuels, including green hydrogen and capture, storage, and use of green hydrogen. Of course, our motto is to transform the future, but it has to be transformed by actions in the present. It's no use to have goals for 2050 and cross our arms and say, let the time go by and look at the reports that are published by the UN that say that the goals are not being met. So we have begun implementing several small projects and several small steps so that we can reach our goal for 2050 at a zero net emission status. Excellent, Sergio. It's great to see these concrete actions. Concrete in a concrete industry. That was so bad. I'm sorry, Juranji. I really like to know about the cement truck consumption. I hadn't really noticed the high consumption that it implies. And also, when you talk about paving roads, that also greatly reduces consumption. You talked about training, the productive chain. I think that has been present in all speeches that were given until now, so it's something really important. And I would like to ask everyone here a question, and I also want to know about the size of all of this within your business, but that's going to be a question for all of those present. And last but not least, Wellington Guidoni, did I get that right? He is CTO of ArcelorMittal here at Bessem. You have 10 minutes. Good afternoon. Fernanda presented me as Wellington Guidoni, but nobody knows me as Wellington there. When we go into the company, we're baptized, so to speak. I came into the company 27 years ago, and there everyone calls me by my last name because despite having the last name Guidoni, I have black grandparents, uh, native Brazilian relatives, Italian from another grandparent. So I am the result of a huge miscegenation of races. I am the diversity in person. But I am the father of two children who are pretty big already. One of them is 27, the other is 23. I came here about a year and a half ago, a little bit more, when Pecém was bought by ArcelorMittal, and it was a very good decision to accept this challenge. I'm very happy and I'm very satisfied. I live in Fortaleza. I go to Pecém every single day. High leadership is present in Pecém every single day, so it's a very happy moment of my private and professional life. I would like to begin by sharing and talking about the numbers of ArcelorMittal a little bit. First here, then Brazil, then Latin America, then Pecém. So ArcelorMittal is present in over 60 countries. It is a little bit more concentrated in Europe. And until 2006, 2007, it was Arcelor, and then it merged and it became ArcelorMittal. And then came this participation in the Americas because Mittal had a stronger presence in the Americas. And more recently, it's been growing to India and China. So it's spread pretty much around the world, 127,000 employees, clients in 170 countries. Originally, the company acted more in steel production and then it expanded and diversified. Today it operates in mineration as well, mining. And we are also very proud to talk about the investment we have in research and development. We have 14 R&D centers spread around the world. We have Chicago, Spain, France. A few years ago, we launched our first R&D center here in Brazil. It's in Tubarão, in Vitória, Espírito Santo. Over 1,700 researchers. In Latin America, we occupy a leadership position in steel production, and over 6 distribution centers. One that is actually close to us here in Maracanaú. In Brazil, when we talk about Brazil, there are 20,000 employees and a production capacity of almost 12 an iron mineral and steel across Brazil. Here in Pecém, talking about Pecém specifically, we have a production capacity of 13 million tons. As of 2016, it was not yet prepared to produce 3 million tons. And now in 2023, for the first time, we produced 13 million tons. We are also very proud to say that the quality of the steel produced here in Pecém, we produce a high added value steel. It's the steel that we call HAV, high added value. And we have equipment here with which we are able to achieve excellent levels so that we can meet the needs of specific markets. I would like to talk a little bit about the decarbonization itself. And, we can talk about, oh, why are we going to decarbonize? What's this story? What's the purpose? And then sometimes we forget to do some analogies. We have a planet that is 4.5 million years old. And when we look at the last 200 years of its story, it's very concerning what's happening to our planet. So if we take the last 30 years, CO2 emissions over the last 30 years were equivalent to over half of every CO2 emission up to date. So what's happening is incredibly serious. This began in Rio 92 and became a goal in Paris in 2015. We have a chart here to your left that is very interesting, where we have this black line that is the background. It has information from the year 2000 on, and when we look at the red line and we see where we're going and what has been done, the promises that were announced at COP23, COP25 actually. And the green line is where we actually should and want to arrive. So you can see several scenarios due to everything that's happening in the world. And to the right, we have the several materials that exist in nature. And you can see that steel is a material that is present throughout the entire transition and decarbonization process. You can see steel, iron, aluminum, and then when you see the green sphere over there on the first line, it's present in all sectors that need to be decarbonized. And steel, let's not forget that it's 100% recyclable. Infinite times. So let's not forget that the industries are responsible for 7%, here in Brazil 4%. Here in Brazil, the characteristic is a little bit different due to the enormous territory and deforesting, so this percentage varies across countries. Moving forward, and this is the main point of my presentation here, this is where we actually talk about the decarbonization strategy of ArcelorMittal. And let's not forget that ArcelorMittal's goal of the group around the world is to, until 2030, decrease 25% of emissions, and until 2050, reach zero emissions. And we have already invested 2 million reais in research and development around all the research and development centers that I mentioned in our first slide. But beginning from the top, from right to left, the first pillar that we have here in which we're investing, and that is already a reality, is working in the efficiency of processes. Improving in management and efficiency, we were already able to decrease between 3 and 4% of emissions compared to prior years. So you really have to take that first step and that first leap to ensure that your process is duly efficient. Then we move on to the use of natural gas. ArcelorMittal understands that it is fundamental to, during this transition, have a volume and price of natural gas, as some colleagues have already explored this theme. We are the end of the line here in terms of pipeline, so we need a volume of natural gas to be able to implement this transition. Then we advance towards the use of biomass. And it's worth emphasizing that ArcelorMittal has a business called ArcelorMittal Bioforest with 100% recycled forests. And we use part of this biomass in some of the ovens of the group across Brazil. And advancing further, the use of recyclable materials. If we could, we'd use 100% of this material, but unfortunately, we are only able to use 18% due to heat issues, so we're able to make a mix of what we produce in the ovens with the percentage of recyclables and everything. All of the recyclables that I add to my ovens, I'm being more efficient in CO2 emissions. And we are strongly working at about 14% of recyclables are what we use currently. We want to reach 18% recyclables and the rest in liquid metals. And then we'll reach that transition over there to the right. For those that don't know, X-Carbid's a certificate, a green certification that ArcelorMittal already has and employs in its products. So for our consumer, our client, we want them to receive a product that is certified for low CO2 emissions. This is a trademark of ArcelorMittal that is growing, incredibly growing worldwide. And then we move on to a change in route. When we look here on the bottom and read from right to left, we begin with renewable energy. Here in Ceará, we have today the production of 3 gigas of renewable energy, and we're going to reach 20. So we want to be part of this story as well. Advancing forward, we have technological updates, especially beginning to use hydrogen a little bit more in our ovens. I unfortunately am not able to convert my ovens to 100% hydrogen due to technical issues. There are other things that can be operated 100%, but we for sure want to expand those operations, and we are considering that fuel as a main option. Advancing to capture and storage of carbon, we have studies, advanced studies. We actually already have a project that recently came out in Belgium where we use the gas in the oven as inputs for ethanol production. So we capture the CO2, we process it, and we're able to reach ethanol. There are other projects as well that are moving along very well and advancing further. We increase renewable energy sources and come closer to neutrality. And when I talked about capture and storage, we have the Maracanaú Basin, Paracuru Basin, sorry. And there we are able to store CO2 as well. So we're studying this, capturing, separating CO2, and maybe in the future, on our path to neutrality, maybe using this as an alternative as well. And until we reach technological transformation, which is the last step towards neutrality, and then we're talking about other technologies for the production of steel, which is the direct reduction at 100% hydrogen with electrical ovens using clean energy, renewable energy. And just to wrap this up, we're reaching our last slide. We have a chart that is very interesting. It shows this black line here. Today we're in a coal matrix and we are walking towards the future where we are going to decrease that use, and our demand for clean energy is ongoing and crescent. We can see here around 2038 we have the break even of these two routes or routes, but of course we have several challenges to be faced. We need to explore new markets, we need to develop funding mechanisms, opportunities for new revenues, risk management, and of course, we also need to have competitive costs, both for natural gas and for hydrogen, so that we are able to implement this plan and make it a reality. We do have plenty of challenges, but we understand that we are in the right place. The acquisition of Pecém by ArcelorMittal, I think, is a success case. To be within this group, it makes me able to see this as a case, really, and we are right next to the largest production of green hydrogen in the world. And for our strategy, that fits like a glove. So it is so satisfying to be living this moment here in Ceará and the northeastern region. It's going to be essential for Micelo Armital's strategy. Thank you, Wellington. You have brought many important messages to us, and I think that as we became aware of tobacco in the 80s, late 70s, society became aware of tobacco, and now we have an actual consciousness, in this case, about CO2 emissions. We don't have any more time, of course, but I am going to grant the floor to each one of you for final considerations, and I would like a comment about what Wellington just talked about, the challenges. I like to say that God has more to give than the devil to take. So, what are our challenges that are probably a lot less significant than the opportunities that we have right now? Now that we are able to see the decarbonization agenda, we see the green agenda as an industrial agenda. So, what are our challenges? Is it costs, materials, new materials, risk, demand, acceptance, consumer perceptance? So, for the final considerations, I would like you to share with us some words. Let's start with Cristiano. Returning to the Santa Quitéria project, I think we have two main steps now, which are great challenges. The first being related to the process of environmental licensing, our authorization. We have very mature and robust studies with a level of engineering that is extremely robust. We are now undergoing the licensing process. We have already been through the initial analysis by IBAMA, where they request ancillary information. We saw this year that IBAMA is still in a scenario of mobilization with a decreased celerity. We, of course, are very solidary to the search by the public servants for improvement in their profession. But the fact of their reivindications did bring challenges, and now we're waiting for that so we can implement the project. So it's a region that still needs to organize itself to receive a project of this size. We also count on support from FIEC in the efforts to be able to, together with SANAI and other institutions, to train everyone to be able to implement this project. And I believe we're going to have scenarios from the decarbonization point of view that are very similar to the cement industry. The technology chosen for this project, which was the best technology found, in fact, exactly similar to that of the cement industry. And we see here throughout the event and through all our colleagues that have presented that we can have synergies and opportunities when we see White Martins talking about the subject. Our colleagues from other companies, we see that throughout our operations, we might still be able to develop further our decrease in CO2 emissions and clean energy in the fertilizing industry, which is a super challenge for us. We thank you very much. Thank you, FIEC, for this event, for this invitation, for having the opportunity to share our projects with you a little bit. Thank you, Cristiano. Guilherme. Well, I think the conditions are granted. The country shows that it has the capacity for renewable energy, which is the main inputs for hydrogen production. I think now with the hydrogen law, the government will now stimulate, after the legislation is passed, they will further stimulate the production. We also need to stimulate the consumption. Then we'll have assessments for companies, carbon credits. All of this is part of the chain, and it is fundamental. And now it's better. So more initiatives are taking place. We need to place more projects, make more projects happen. The laws are fundamental. The technology we already have within the group, we take place in assessments throughout several countries that have been advancing and already have projects that are majoritively. These are countries that most of them have a huge amount of subsidizing. You see projects in the United States and German that are highly subsidized. Of course, that's not the scenario here in Brazil, but they have the advantage of renewable energy, and I think now is the ideal thing to do would be to see all of the projects presented here, that the legislation surrounding hydrogen be implemented and ratified, and that we are able to generate this element, and that for all of those presenting here at FIEC Summit, bringing forward their projects, we're going to be able to generate a virtuous cycle where, thank you so much. We already have the legislation has been passed, the green hydrogen legislation. Now we're going on to the second step of this law. Rodrigo, I think we've already talked plenty about regulation. Regulation is fundamental for us to be able to advance in green hydrogen here in Brazil, and also for green fertilizers. You commented, Fernanda, it has been approved. The framework has entered into force. It was a very successful procedure. The second part is just as important for the step. Specifically talking about fertilizers, Brazil has created, I think, 2 years ago, and last year, it was updated, the fertilizer plan. And in the end, what the Brazilian government, Brazilian state needs is to diminish this dependency on imported fertilizers. And there is a goal to bring down from 85 to 5%, but there's several guidelines that need to be implemented. And I see this as a big factor, specifically talking about the green fertilizer industry, to make new projects leave the world of ideas and come into practice. If I had anything to add, that would be it. We want more invoices, Rodrigo, less projects and more action. Aside from everything already mentioned here by the others, regulation, incentives, I think that one of the challenges that I see is that there's no way to decarbonize these sectors without doing it differently. Doing it differently requires innovation, and innovation requires a change in mentality. We need a lot more collaborative work between the several points and extremities of the chain, so that we are able to produce and do in a different way and effectively, as you commented right now, Fernanda. We actually need actions. And as my wife says, we definitely need to put into practice all of that and avoid that events like this bring year after year the same projects, and that many never leave the world of hypothesis. We need society involved to be able to think and behave in different ways. Of course, when I look at construction, recycling, residue or waste from construction, that is still something that is very incipient, and that depends on everyone, as you commented before. It depends on us to begin doing that within our houses. So maybe that's one of the main challenges that we see before us. We'll get there. Thank you, Sérgio Wellington. Fernanda, today when I got to, the first thing I saw when I came outside was a 100% hydrogen-driven car, and I was so excited, and I discovered it already existed since 2016 in the US and Japan. So I see that we're living through a revolution. We're experiencing a revolution, just as we did when we changed from black and white TV to a colored TV, the internet, the cell phone. And when we least expected it, and we blink, we will be using green hydrogen and everything. We need to start mixing it with other fuels. We need to, little by little, this is going to happen very seamlessly. Of course, we do need to address, as you mentioned, the regulation that is coming. We need alignment between municipal, state, and federal governments. We can't have a municipal government pulling one way, a state government pulling the other, so this is fundamental. We do have challenges of developing new markets and green products, consumers who are aware, so that aware and willing to pay a little bit more for this transformation in the planet. You talked about the next step, which is funding and etc. But we have to have access to sources with a large scale volume of renewables. And that is fundamental. And we need legal security, assertiveness. We saw a delay in 2 years, which, in my view, the legal stableness was what affected this decision. And these are the main challenges from my point of view. Thank you so much, Wellington. Cristiano, Guilherme, Rodrigo, Sérgio, Wellington, thank you so much for participating in this panel. In 1962, President Kennedy professed a speech in the White House where he requested resources from the federal government to take the man to the moon. He wanted to take the man to the moon and bring him back in safety during that century, and he didn't want to do it because it was easy. He wanted to do it exactly because it was hard, because it was extraordinary, and because that industry would, in the United States, entail a series of spin-offs involving technology, improvements for education, for medicine, and today, in August 2024, we see the green hydrogen industry being born with the same capability of bringing several spin-offs involving technology, education, decarbonization, a new industry that is complex and sophisticated with high added value, and that will begin here in Ceará. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you, Fernanda Delgado, our moderator in this panel, and our speakers. Excellent panel. I request that everyone come up here to this point so that we can take a picture at the center of the stage before I request for us to continue here. Continue our event. Let's remember, today is our first day. We have activities throughout tomorrow as well here at the Centro de Eventos. We have panels and speakers. You can visit the stands during the intervals, and we have a very rich program and agenda, as you have probably seen. Our conferences are very rich in information. Thank you, Fernanda, Guilherme, Sérgio, Guidoni, everyone here present today. And now we are going to continue with our programming. As I was mentioning, we have a market here in parallel, another 2 auditoriums. We have technical silence panels that is in parallel to what we have here in the auditorium, in the plenaries. Now we're going to move on to our second panel of our FIEC Summit 2024. I am honored to present to you our keynote speaker. Let's get to know him here on the screen. Let's receive Mr. Jorge Batarsi, ABB Industrial Business Manager for Hydrogen and PTX. A round of applause for our speaker.
Okay, do you hear me? Is it okay? Okay, great. Everything okay? Okay, awesome. So thanks very much for the introduction. My name is Jorge. I'm from Chile. I'm the global lead for hydrogen for ABB. ABB is a global company with more than 130 years of experience, more than 115,000 people in more than 17 divisions, mostly working around electrification and automation solutions. And here I'm responsible for everything related to strategy, offering, business development, and marketing. So I prepared a very short presentation that explains in some degree how to enhance financial viability of hydrogen projects and focusing a lot on the global aspects of this industry, but also going a little bit into how does the Brazilian market really looks like. Huh? So starting with this, that's the agenda. I will explain the global markets and trends, how to navigate all the paths and application of hydrogen and its derivatives, the challenges of how to structure and develop a hydrogen project, how I defining the opportunity for this market, and finally, what we at ABB are doing. Huh? So first of all, some context. Whenever we think about green hydrogen, we're not really thinking about just that. There's a lot of other derivatives, and nowadays in the market, where we're seeing the most is derivatives. Why? Because there is already a massive demand, and the process and the technology is pretty well known. Whenever we think about just green hydrogen, we need to understand the challenges of producing green hydrogen and managing it all in relation to the energy balance penalties that are related. For any other process, we need other ingredients, as stated in the slide, that may account for the production of other ingredients such as carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. So when thinking about the application of hydrogen, we see two paths. One path relates to the production of derivatives, another path for its direct use. So there are two other options what relates to transport and blending, which are not really well standardized in the market, and most of the opportunities that we see relates to the production of derivatives, which is the case of ammonia. For the hard-to-abate sector is where we see most of the opportunities nowadays, because it's really an opportunity of how to decarb those assets. Huh? Here in Brazil, for example, one of the most impactful opportunities in the pulp and paper. Why? Because they produce a biogenic CO2, they have excess of energy, and as well they need oxygen for the process. So there is a very interesting business cases that could be structured for the hard-to-abate sector. So when understanding the complete landscape, we need to understand that hydrogen is, as a new industry, is pretty diverse. And when you see the first chart, you'll understand that in every place where we have good renewable assets, we'll find hydrogen opportunities. Second, as we are integrating variable renewable sources into the production of hydrogen, most of those energy profiles are very volatile, which impose severe constraints and challenges whenever we're trying to design electrical architectures. On the third chart, you will see that most of what is being designed is derivatives. Why? Because it's simpler, it's more competitive, and above all, there is already a massive demand. On the fourth chart, what is important to understand is that projects are getting bigger. How big? Most of them on the gigascale. On the fifth chart, you will see that the offering of electrolyzers is quite a challenge. There are more than 115 electrolyzer offerings, and that means that it's very difficult to standardize and modularize the balance of process because there are too many offerings, and each electrolyzer represents a very unique way to produce hydrogen and how to evacuate energy. We need to think about the electrolyzers as a way of evacuating energy, such as an electrical equipment rather than a chemical one. And in the last slide, in the last chart, we'll see that this industry is very price sensitive. That's why they're trying to select more electrolyzers that are cheaper rather than more expensive ones. So in order to really navigate what makes sense in hydrogen, we need to understand a few things that are in some degree very industry specific. So as you see here in this list, there are several applications for hydrogen, but how to define which one makes more sense than other is a very tough job. So the exercise that we did in ABB relates to rank each one of them by how reliable is the technology, how efficient is the process, and how impactful is the business case. So as you see in this chart, there are some applications for hydrogen that are unavoidable, and there is where we see most of the demand. For example, more than 80% of the project globally relates to ammonia. Why? Because there is already a massive demand of it, and most of it is being produced from gray sources. That means that per every ton of hydrogen that is produced, around 8 tons of CO2 are being released to the atmosphere whenever a gray source is being used. Then on, for the other segments, which are the challenges, mostly relate to the way of producing biogenic CO2, so the e-fuels can be produced. And for the transport and power generation, the main challenge relates to the way of storage in hydrogen. Whenever we store hydrogen, in order to increase their energy density, we need to understand that we can lose up to 5% of whatever we're trying to storage due to the energy requirements. And whenever we try to liquefy hydrogen, the overall energy balance penalties could get up to 20%. So from here, we define some waves. So wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3. The easiest wave to tackle is the first one by anticipating the main challenge that it has. So we define some drivers and enablers for each one of these waves, being the first driver for the wave 1, decarbing the fertilizer industry. And the enabler of that is being able to really produce hydrogen in a very cost-competitive way. And that is the root problem for any application of hydrogen. So from our perspective, we cannot jump into any application of hydrogen if we first don't tackle how we really need to produce hydrogen in an efficient way. Hydrogen is just a commodity, so this is an industry that is extremely price driven. So in this slide, I wanted to explain which are the challenges of producing green hydrogen whenever we are integrating a variable renewable sources. This whole presentation is framed so I can explain the global problems, the global needs, and then on explain the potential of Brazil, because Brazil really don't have any of these issues due to the way the supply of energy is structured here. So the first thing to understand is that we need renewables, and the renewables do impose their nature. And their nature relates to variability, intermittency, and seasonality. Whenever we use that power to electrify any process, in most of the cases, we need to manage aspects such as the power management and all the electrical parameters. So what happens if we don't manage the electrical parameters? We could have generation shocks, and that means that we could eventually have black start, and that means that the complete production process could be shut down. And in hydrogen, on any hydrogen projects, that is something that we don't want. Why? Because hydrogen is highly explosive, and ammonia is highly toxic. So safety and reliability should always be considered as number one priority. Second, without grid stability in off-grid systems or in variable renewable energy profiles, we don't have a feasible project. So that means that a project will be constantly failing and having issues. So grid stability is the main aspect to solve in the development of any electrification process. Then, in order to produce green hydrogen, the selection of electrolyzers is by far the most important decision to make, because the electrolyzer account at least for 30% of the cost of any project. And whenever we integrate renewables, we need to avoid something that is called dynamic operation. So dynamic operation means that the electrolyzer production is following the behavior of the renewable asset. And that means that utilization rates eventually will be very low. So whenever we think about optimizing the levelized cost of hydrogen, we need to think of high utilization rates. So the levelized cost is just a way of stating how efficient is a project during complete lifespan. So it's like buying a car and seeing a sticker that says this car will cost you to drive $2 per every mile for the next 30 years. So it puts into account the cost of the project, the cost of the maintenance, the cost of the fuel, and the cost of any possible incident. So levelized cost is really the true metric by which these projects are being measured. And that's why it's so important to reduce the cost of the production, but above all, try to stabilize the supply of energy so the electrolyzers can work as stable and as predictable as possible. Another aspect that is very important is that whenever we have dynamic operation, the degradation of all the chemical assets is accelerated. So we need to provide more predictability and stability to the overall system, not just for the electrolyzer, but also for any kind of downstream reaction, such as the production of ammonia. Then, what I did in this chart, as you see here, is I painted all the countries where we find good renewable capacity factors. What means capacity factors is just the efficiency of a renewable asset to produce energy. So the higher the capacity factor, the most efficient is that specific country and region in producing energy, and that means that you need less renewables to produce more energy. So on the right, you see all the type of renewable assets that could be eventually involved, even nuclear in some places of the world, and they are ranked from more stable to less stable, or from more valuable to less valuable. And in the bottom right, you see some criteria where also ranked countries for more impactful to less impactful. So what is important here to understand is that first, this hydrogen industry is very related to capacity factors, but capacity factors that means that low prices of energy is not the main criteria by which a hydrogen project should be structured. It's stability. Stability is the true enabler of hydrogen projects, and is there where Brazil has its highest potential. Why? Because most of the energy generation here in Brazil is from renewables, and from there is hydro, and hydro is extremely stable, and it's in this region where we find most of the solar and wind assets being developed. So the correct balance between prices and stability of energy is the key aspect by which a hydrogen project should be structured. So in the beginning, this industry started by having developers chasing just good renewable assets, but most of these energy profiles are variable, which means that they have severe constraints. Also in this region, we have massive grids and ports, something that we can't find in that way in any other place in the world. So, for example, in Chile, just there, where we find the best wind capacity factors of the world, there are like a dozen projects being developed, but they don't have grids, they don't have a port, and they are all off-grid. That means that they need to self-stabilize, and that means adding energy storage solutions on a giga scale in order to absorb all the generation shocks. In the north of Chile, we have the best solar in the world, but again, it's off-grid. So you have 8 hours of generation. What do we do with the other 16? In the Americas, there's no grids that can really support gigascale projects, and all the projects in Australia and Oman are off-grid. That means that Brazil really have a good balance between potential and installed infrastructure that can really enable this industry to move forward in a much faster way. So what is ABB doing in this segment? More than selling our electrical and automation solution, we are helping customers in very initial phases understand if their energy profiles are really feasible for a hydrogen project, as not every energy profile can really be stabilized in a cost-efficient way. This is something that we do with a specific team, modeling all the electrical stuff, And why electrical? Because hydrogen is mostly an electrical problem, as all the optimization opportunities relate upstream or before the electrolyzer is selected, because hydrogen is just the conversion from electrons to molecules, and the only way to really optimize the cost of hydrogen is by having a not only cheap energy, but a stable energy that will help us have predictability. And only when we have predictability, we can really size accordingly the electrolyzers and reduce costs there. By doing that, we will be able to fix or define the operational philosophy that will provide governance to the overall process. From there, we account for different development phases where we continue doing electrical studies in order to add more precision and validate the overall process architecture. Regardless of it is the end consumer or the developer or O&M or EPC, this is extremely needed as it adds predictability to the overall development phase, reduce costs, reduce development times, and above all, it tells the developer if the project is well structured or not. So for example, if we have a project that is 100% solar off-grid, it's too expensive to stabilize right away. But then on, when we merge different type of renewable assets from wind, solar, hydro, plus the grid, doing the overall balance for grid stability becomes quite a complex exercise to do. And only when we know that, we will know eventually if that project can be stabilized in a cost-efficient way. So this is really the root problems of any hydrogen project anywhere, regardless of scale, application, or location. And these kind of studies are very needed. So finally, why is this so important? Again, is because off-takers are extremely needed for any hydrogen project. So without off-takers, of someone really to pay for whatever is being produced, it's kind of difficult to have investments or having investors jumping in. So we in EBB, we close this cycle by first supporting the developers in having a project that is not only feasible but competitive. We do the same assessments for all the off-takers that are willing to validate if the production is really what they expect, so they can sign intention letters based upon a specific levelized cost band of whatever the project is intending to produce. And only there, an investor will jump in. So an investor will always select projects that are well structured and they are competitive. And we assess that in closing the correct loop. Finally, we assess with white papers policymakers so they understand which regions are more competitive, which regions need more infrastructure investments, as grid, for example, and having a well-diversified supply of energy, as I explained, is really the true enabler of this industry. And Brazil, in that way, is extremely well positioned globally, as it doesn't have the extra challenges that any other project really has. So that was what I prepared. Thank you very much, everyone, for their time. I hope you find it useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jorge Batanzi. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you so much to our keynote speaker, Mr. Jorge Batanzi from ABB, ABB Industrial Business Manager for Hydrogen PTX. And now we continue throughout our journey of presentations at FIEC Summit 2024, an event that takes place today and tomorrow at Centro de Eventos in our sunny and beautiful Fortaleza, the capital of Ceará. Our panel now has as its theme energy generation and storage. Let's get to know our speakers. Financing of energy transition projects will be our next. Mr. Guilherme, Manager of the Electric Energy Department at FIEC, Manager of the Industry Observatory, FIEC System, Guilherme Muchali, our moderator, Carlos Antônio Costa, Senior Economist of Energy of the World Bank, Guilherme Oliveira Arantes, Manager of the Electric Energy Department, Giselda Freire, Director of Planning at Banco do Nordeste do Brasil, and Mr. Rony Peterson, Corporate Head, Construction, Agribusiness, Infrastructure, and Large Corporate at Caixa Econômica. I am going to grant the floor to our moderator. Feel free to begin our panel. Good afternoon to everyone. I wanted to thank the presence of all of those that are here today, not only those here in person, but also those online. It's a pleasure to comment such a relevant theme, which is the financing of energy transition projects, remembering the very relevant role that they have in reducing the risks and uncertainties on investments and the mathematics that involve market risks and others that are relevant. And that based on financing and funding, we are able to accelerate this transition. And who knows, maybe even make decarbonization and production of these items be accelerated within the environmental commitments that the countries have established. So we made an agreement here to begin with a 5-minute speech for all of those here. And within the questions that you bring to us, then we, in our final minutes, will be able to contemplate the questions that you have on funding and financing. So I'm going to begin with Carlos Antônio Costa and ask him to begin his presentation. Feel free if you want to use the pulpit. Thank you, Guilherme. Good afternoon to everyone here. It's always a pleasure to be here in Fortaleza. It's my second home. And us from the World Bank, we have been since the beginning in this journey. So we are very proud to be the great partners today of the Ceará government, and I would say of the Northeast as a whole. Moving on to our theme of today, which is financing, we see two great issues that are fundamental, which is shared infrastructure, and that was talked about today, and the other is bringing down the systematic risk of projects. Beginning with shared infrastructure, right now we are financing the expansion of the Pecém complex with a multiple use space in the port and another space that will store ammonia to then bring it to the boat, to the ships and the fleet. We also have the pier that is going to deal with the export of ammonia. So that is the project that is currently underway. It is a $90 million project plus $35 million that we were able to get from concessional sources. And we also have more financing available if it is needed to finish the work. But it doesn't stop there. The complex is going to need financing for water supply, provision. It will need financing for the electrical connection to the grid, and it will also need financing for the utility corridor itself that we have already seen a presentation. So right there we're talking about a financing of $300 million at least that are needed to implement shared infrastructure in the Pecém port in the next years. And talking about shared infrastructure and systematic risk, for those who are economists, they will remember that systematic risk is within the beta coefficient For those more familiarized with the model, this model can also be applied to debt. So when we incorporate this in the conceptual matrix, we end up noticing finally that by decreasing debt, we are decreasing the systemic risk of the project. And that's what these two operations are about. The two operations recently approved for $1 billion with BNDES, $500 million with BNB. So we are applying 1.5 billion under an umbrella operation that has to do with the decarbonization of energy matrix and industries, and this umbrella project is the largest World Bank initiative in Brazil to date. So, in Latin America to date. So, our commitment with the Northeastern region and Brazil is very evident. And once again, we are very proud to say that the World Bank is a huge partner of the federal government and the Northeast region. Well, I'm going to grant the floor to Guilherme Arantes so that he can also present himself. Would you like to speak in your chair? Or? Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone here. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about hydrogen. I would like to, first of all, point out that for BNDES, the climatic agenda is a huge opportunity for the country to develop. So hydrogen is going to be one of the technologies that are going to help in that process. And they may cooperate to this development agenda that passes through the development of green decarbonized elements in industries. It has a relevant role in the energy sector of the country. We are present in energy generation financing in a very relevant way and always dedicated to renewable energy projects and the development of new technologies, and we would very much like to continue this trajectory. And hydrogen is one of the paths to continue this journey. From the point of view of what we have been seeking to do, we participate in all discussion forums and we try to bridge the private world and government and develop policies. It's always been like that, and we have the basis for that with everything that was developed in renewables in the active cooperation, helping to design auction structures, the risking of projects so that they were financeable. And we see this opportunity of hydrogen, as I mentioned. We see it as a continuity. And the bank, now with using Carlos Worlds, the bank has a relevant role also in the development of green finances in the country. So the first institution to issue green securities abroad, green securities domestically, and BNDES has an experience, a huge experience of partnerships with the several multilateral financial institutions, World Bank, development banks, co-financing projects, and also being this funding collector. So the bank aspires to be a platform for green projects in Brazil. So we are seeking to cooperate and be a catalyzer of this incentivized resource attraction involving private and public, international and domestic, so that we can take these projects sustainable projects in general that and focus on hydrogen, which is our theme today. And this entire experience, for whether it be with what we have already cooperated on in renewable resources or in the articulation between private and public entities, the bank sees itself as holding an important role to be able to unwind these investments with the smallest funding cost possible so that we can mitigate the risks of these new technologies and cooperate for them to develop in the country. So I think that was it for my opening words. I'm anxious for the debate. Thank you. So let's move on to the first words of BNB representative. José Aldemir Freire, Director of Planning at Banco do Nordeste do Brasil. Good afternoon to all of those here. I had a presentation, but we promised we wouldn't present anything, so I'm just going to summarize everything of how we understand the bank's insertion into this process involving energy transition. First of all, the bank is the largest agent within of energy transition. The bank financed approximately 40 billion reais between centralized generation and micro generation, distributed micro generation, so that we work with an average of approximately 7 billion reais per year in financing and funding to the electrical industry of the northeastern region. The bank has today the best credit conditions for the region through the FNE. Our lines for financing begin at 12 years long and with between 4 and 8 years and between 7 and 12% per year in interest. Up to 12 years grace period. The northeastern region will go through a long investment cycle in the next 10 years. Northeast will be most certainly, without a doubt, not only the driving engine of development in the national energy industry, it actually already is. If you take the developments of the industry, 90% of the expansion of this industry is based on renewable sources, and 98% is happening here in the northeastern region. So this expansion of the northeastern region as a major energy supplier for the country will continue with two frontiers or that will also demand huge investments. The wind frontier, offshore wind frontier, that will probably very soon come into picture and demand investments and financing, and green hydrogen. And another one that is also relevant and we believe will soon come into play is energy storage. So if we look at offshore generation itself, both solar and wind, if we look at onshore generation, if we look at green hydrogen, if we look at energy storage and transmission, because all of this energy, the northeastern region cannot use all of the energy that is going to be produced. So we are going to need to transmit this energy. And this will demand a huge volume of investments, but it's not just energy we're going to work with. We're also going to see huge investments in basic sanitation and huge investments in logistics. And in logistics, you will see everything from ports the Trans-Northeastern railroads. The Trans-Northeastern is foreseen to be delivered until 2027. You will see roads, you will see airports, and there is yet another one, another influence, which is connectivity, another huge expansion of 5G in the region. So we have a huge demand for investment that is significant from the point of view of infrastructure investments. And there's also another relevant demand, which is when you look at Brazilians' recent history, what happens with the demand for consumption in the northeastern region when you have low inflation, a decrease in unemployment, and an increase in income? Consumption blows up. And so that means you're going to have a higher demand for the consumption of industrial goods. And there's also another item that I haven't mentioned, which is Matopiba, that is in development with the agricultural frontier of the region. And we are going to have the processing of grains and production aside from food of biofuels. And another item that comes into play is electromobility. If you pay attention, an expressive part of investments, a significant part of the automobile industry, is going to take place in two huge projects. One, Stellantis in Goiânia, and another, BYD, in Bahia. There's another project here pointing to Ceará that is going to demand not only investments by these companies, but also significant investments into this chain. And this is going to demand a huge volume of financing. That is going to, I'm going to leave aside for the second part of my speech. Thank you. Let's move on to Ronnie Pedersen. Ronnie Peterson, who is corporate head of construction, agribusiness, infrastructure, and large corporate at Caixa Econômica. I would like to thank you for the honor of representing Caixa, and I'm going to show you really quickly here. We agreed there would be no presentation, so I'm just going to pop up some slides so you can understand Caixa's timing right now. The moment it is going through, right after our president announced the framework of this very important theme in Brazil. So every time that Caixa is called upon, it has a fundamental role of managing the country's economy. It would not be different at this time. I just want you to understand the importance that Caixa gives to this theme. A vice presidency was created specifically for sustainability, so we could give the due outflow for the demand that we already have in the bank. The legal framework that provides more legal assurance for every sustainable finance business. This benefit also encompasses Caixa. Why? Because it's a provocation for Caixa to develop its portfolio and enhance its sustainability portfolio. This theme has a huge capillarity throughout the country. I would like to say hello to everyone here from the state of Ceará, those who are directly connected to business relationship. Talk to this theme here if you need anything. It's through them that we receive the inputs to be a better bank with better products, with better businesses for you. The idea of benefit that we have is to strengthen the relationship with our client. Funding, as our colleagues mentioned, to improve transparency, strengthen, of course, the Caixa brand, and have a policy for foreseeing regulatory changes. We have a very good classification before moods, but we know that there is still a huge challenge of bringing into practice what this segment needs. Here we want to show you the partnerships and cooperations that we have been developing over the last 2 years. We had a memorandum of understanding with Great Britain and with France. Instituto GEA has already applied 9.7 million as an institute, so that allows us to have a bigger capacity for restructuring and operations uh, with recycler cooperatives. And I'm going to leave here for debate between incorporators and municipalities and others. Caixa now has its own sustainable management seal. We have 117 municipalities recognized with this seal, and it generates a benefit for involving operations. It optimizes it shows the optimization of use of renewable resources, and this is very much involved with this seal. We have the TEA program, which involves technology, has been hugely debated today, so Caixa could not remain afar from that, removed from that theme. So we need to be ahead of our time to be able to meet the needs of the market as a whole. Caixa Homes, just so you get to know a little bit of the numbers. In 2024, the first quarter, we contracted 51.3 billion reais in housing, and it's a very strong segment. Caixa is very strong, and it wants to continue with this share and to grow its relationship with the entire chain. Here we have the lotteries, just so you understand how Caixa engages in sustainability and how it passes on its resources. Here we have the Olympics just ended, so how much did Caixa, thinking about the investment in sports, it distributes amounts through its programs, and through that it has social benefits that a lot of you already know. So here are some overall numbers, just so you understand, of the portfolio that we have. We have 557 billion in housing, 95 infrastructure, 72 in FIES, 42 commercial, 12.7 agribusiness, which we will probably triple and make it even more sustainable and just. Just to wrap up, due to our time, what is our purpose? Notice that is very much aligned with the theme that we are debating here at FIEC. What is Caixa's purpose? To be the public financial institution that fosters inclusion and sustainable development, transforming people's lives. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rony. Well, now we're going to divide ourselves here, take 10 minutes and talk about the main topics of this panel, and then we're going to have 2 minutes as their final considerations. But before that, I just wanted to leave something in the air and ask Antonio Costa to comment about this worldwide race to strengthen energy transition chains. Brazil is actually a little bit behind in terms of national strategy. So since 2019, 2020, several countries from Europe and others have launched their national strategies, and Brazil has been crawling towards that, and recently with a little bit more speed. So how do you see this search by countries and Brazil's positioning, especially in terms of funding? So we were able to decrease this gap compared to the main players and how they have been working, but within the initiatives, what are the main differentials brought here by the World Bank and other institutions that we have here at the table to be able to accelerate this process, enable Brazil to have a considerable role within this very important market? You began the question with the framework, which took a little bit. You don't create the world in one day, so I believe that this time to mature the idea was the correct path, but of course, eventually, we had other expectations, and we think it could have incorporated this or that, but nowadays we have the framework. We have incentives. And the most important is the political commitment of the President of the Republic to actually bring these projects to life. The presence of Lula 2 weeks ago here, I think, was a mark, and it seals the commitment of the federal government with the hydrogen theme. And for us, it was a huge sign. It truly signaled something for this endeavor. So, with the involvement of the federal government around hydrogen and the energy network of the country, perfect. And when you ask how the World Bank sees this, the World Bank has a program. Ceará was one of the first ones to join this program, and we call it Ceará. The government is part of this global program, actually, and we complement this global program with technical assistance. We have MDIC involved as well, MDIC. We have Pecém, Suape, Camaçari, Rio Grande, the Minas Center. We are also supporting the master plan of Pecém Complex, and soon we will begin a really interesting project for the energy equilibrium and water equilibrium of the complex, and decarbonizing the complex itself. We believe this will be the first case that we think of adapting or cloning even to other ports of the country. And soon we will begin a project on water supply to the complex, analyzing water reuse and consumable water, potable water. We will also be supporting the Pecém complex with a consultant for the Innovation Center. And I'm probably forgetting something here, something else, but in the end, what I want to do is talk about a theme that is very important to us, which is the need and the convenience, historically speaking, to bring women into this endeavor. The Olympic Games show that women in their best protagonism. So our commitment here as World Bank is that women have a role of leadership in this. And it's such a pity that here at FIEC, it's something that I actually talked to them about last year, and unfortunately we do not yet meet the representativeness that I would like. A very relevant speech, very relevant words. I am very sure that next year we will be up there in representativity. I would like BNB, BNDES, and Caixa to comment about the importance of the public sector to the financing of these industries that are arising. So research and development, pilot plants, a series of ways to reduce the risks that are inherent to the new segments. How do you see the complementarity, the action focuses of each of these institutions, and how will it be possible to allow financing to arrive to supplier chains, and how will production processes need to be changed to consume this green hydrogen? That's such a good question. We could spend hours here, but I'm going to be very brief. In fact, we're going to need the engagement, a strong engagement and dedicated engagement of all institutions possible for us to be able to, thinking of the energy transition as a whole, these are really high investments. So we're talking about leaving an economy, thinking about energy transition. We will be leaving an economy that is pretty much low cost in terms of financing but high operations, to an investment that high investments upon the initiation. So that increases the relevance of financing. And when we talk about all the technology possible and all the investments that will be needed, for me to have a gigawatt plant of hydrogen, I'm going to need investments in energy production, transmission, the industry that's going to consume this hydrogen, the fertilizer industry, and several other products. So we're talking about a lot of investment. And we're going to need the engagement of all agents possible. So BNDES is going to has a national scope. It has a very robust balance, and it's capable of, with this balance, raising plenty of funds and financing several connections, not just in energy, but industry in all regions. BNB is also going to have a, an emphatic role. FINEP is going to have an emphatic role in the financing of research and development, which is an extremely important link for us to move forward with in cost reduction and technology advancement to ensure the success of this transition. So the coordination, I think this is a key word, coordinating. It's a very great challenge that we will need to deal with and overcome. So we will need to coordinate all of the links in this network, whether it be in financing, but coordinating public policies, all of the entities of government on all levels of government, so that we can all walk towards the future in a single direction. So, talking a little bit more about the specific BNDES partnership with other institutions like the World Bank, for example, we are seeking and prepared for, we have the most appropriate economic financial instruments when the investment is needed for these projects, because BNDES does not act so much in the development. We actually stay more focused on financing for the project when it is taken to a commercial scale. Investment for commercial scale. So the World Bank has these resources for technical assistance, support for the development of the project. We enter in the financing of the capex. So we seek this preparation and this dialogue and this coordination in search of funding, of having these funding lines available so that the project can reach the maturity for investment and we are able to contribute as a funder to enable all the projects to become actual projects in practice. Perfect. I'm going to pass the floor on to our colleagues from Caixa and BNB. They asked me to comment that this year they have reached 35% in registrations. Here are women. And there is a commitment to further grow the female participation for next year. I'm going to pass the floor on to our colleagues from Caixa and BNB so they can wrap up this panel with a little bit about the institutions that are complementary to our other colleagues. Caixa Econômica has, as I said in my introduction, Caixa has the challenge of complementing and being close to the companies that present economically feasible projects. Just so you can have an idea, we already have within Caixa over 2 million reais, which seems like a small amount, but this happened before the framework. So what we are already able to perceive is that post the ratification, this should triple. I would say we have a huge challenge. I envy you, BNDs. They know everything about economic viability, and we are very close to them. Luciana has been an exemplary partner, Aloysio as well, because we need to give each other our hands, hold hands together to move towards the future of the country. And there is a challenge for industries as well to present projects that are economically feasible, because invariably, sometimes the feasibility project does not happen according to the expectations of the company or industry. So I would like to tell everyone here that it's the CFO, the financial manager, the financial director. Everyone has to sit down and present to the risk area of the bank, to the person responsible for that client relationship. They need to present that project and present it in a way to ensure to the bank that it is viable. Caixa's budget for this topic is not small. And right now, we need to be protagonists in this environment as a bank that brings together funding and that sits together with its partner, so that at the end of the day, we can meet the needs and the expectations of the business people out there. And due to Caixa's ability to be everywhere in the country, we have a specific wholesale vice presidency that is geared specifically towards meeting your needs. And have no doubt, rest assured, that this is a new theme within Caixa still. We have created a specific vice presidency for relationships that is separated from commercial relationships, but our relationship team will be the differential. On our part, you can rest assured that if it's a good project, it's viable, and it makes sense for the country, we will be your partners, and we will be here for whatever you need. Thank you so much. Taking advantage of this moment here, I'm just going to give a little bit of continuity to my thoughts. In Brazil, the GDP is about 11 trillion per year. Here in Northeast, it's 14% of that, so let's talk about a GDP of 1.5 trillion. If we talk about an investment rate of 18%, the expectation is that it'll increase and reach 20% in the next 10 years. But let's talk about an investment rate of 18%. Right there, we would have an annual need for investment in the order of 270 billion reais. If we do a classic calculation of about 70% of that investment being funded, we are going to need almost 200 billion reais year of financing within the northeastern region. And the main funding in the region is going to will probably reach 47 billion next year and is walking towards 50 billion in the year after that. So it's something that we are convinced of. Our main resource and our main investment funding for the region is insufficient. So we need to make efforts to capture alternative financing for the region and alternative ways of financing. In alternative fundraising, what have we been doing? We have been establishing partnerships with multilateral institutes. We raised 150 million euros last year to finance the energy sector mainly. We are also raising $300 million with the Inter-American Development Bank for the infrastructure of the public sector. We are, I think until next year, we'll probably have these resources available. $500 million with the World Bank for the decarbonization of the northeastern industries. We are also discussing with the new development bank another $500 million. We're also talking to KfW, and the federal government just allocated 1,500,000 so that we can be supported in the internalization of these resources, and we are also raising resources internally. And then we have a highlight with BNDES. We are now operating again with BNDES and also with FINEP, which is an important source of resources. And we can see that in addition to financing itself, even if we do raise these funds, Banco do Nordeste, and especially FNE, it will work as a reduction agent because it was meant to finance everyone. So it can finance the popcorn maker and the huge industries, and it has to be capable of providing resources for any kind of client. So what we do is we're going to participate as moderators of capital. We're going to enter with a mix of resources so that we moderate the cost of the capital because we have lower interest rates. We need to promote non-refundable resources. Last year, the bank published a public notice about 20 million for research in this area of renewable energy, and we need to meet a need, especially in the research area, with non-refundable resources. And we also need to establish partnerships with BNDES, with concessional resources and FINEP. We already have a few, but we need to further develop participation funds that are geared toward investments in the region. We already have partnerships with BNDES. We also want to participate in participation funds with BNDES. A 1 billion fund for investments in strategic minerals that also interrelates with this conversation, and we also want to create funds for receivables and others. So we need to be able to create other kinds of financing that go beyond traditional financing and that move into non-reimbursable funds and other ways of acquiring debt. And yet, public banks will still be minority. There is still a need to allocate resources from investors. These investments in green hydrogen are all billionaires. They're all in the order of billions. So if you don't have a certain capacity for investment as a company, it's very difficult to bring a project like that to life. And with the international market, you can also seek resources abroad. But what happens is that internationally, you have resources that are at a good price, but once you apply the currency exchange, it ends up bringing up the costs of these loans. So there's a huge need for financial engineering, and we need to develop part of this engineering. I thank you very much. Let's go to our final considerations. I'm going to give 1 more minute for everyone to be able to conclude and maybe complement it with something that they find relevant or that they haven't been able to touch on and they would like to include. Thank you, Guilherme. The main message that the World Bank is saying is that we have an umbrella operation of $1 billion for energy matrix. And the good news is that we could easily increase without having to go through the bank's bureaucracy. Once it is approved by the board, all we have to do is, of course, it does have to go through the federal government, but we won't have the internal bureaucracy. So basically, we have 1.5 billion, and if successful, we would be able to apply one more billion if the government needed. And well, I guess in the next 12 months, we will see a lot of action, and I hope that next year we are able to talk about projects that are being financed by BNDES or BNB. Thank you. Thank you. My message is also one of optimism. I hope that from now on we can have more and more projects reaching the phase of investment so that we can finally overlook these projects. We talked about the future, about being prepared, having partnerships. In terms of funding, the bank now currently has traditional funding, which is the regular cost, but we're going to need this mobilization for more incentivized funding, exactly as our colleague from BNB mentioned, to bring this final cost down, to reduce this final cost. What we have as instruments today is the Climate Fund, which is the main instrument for sustainable projects. It was strengthened last year by raising $2 billion from Treasury, who provided these resources in reais to BNDES. That's 10 billion reais, so we have a very competitive cost in this fund. And furthermore, last year we also began having our TR funding, so so we are able to refund with the same interest rate as FIEP. That's BNDES plus innovation, which is more focused on innovation. But we can also have hydrogen projects that focus more. We have pilot plants, and we understand that hydrogen will have more appeal for this. We have the R&D strategy by Enel, with several projects being presented, and we believe that the Enel R&D is important to complement so that we have more pilot projects and we have a chain of investments, smaller investments, while we're waiting for the decisions on higher ones, be it in ports, fertilizers, everything we've been seeing. We are prepared to work in partnership with several funding sources and with instruments that are already available today for the sector. So thank you very much once again for the opportunity. Oh, we still have Valdemir. I am very excited about the perspective of the northeastern region in the next years. I think it's a historical window that is very important for the region. The northeastern region, as a producer of renewable energy, that is given. It's going to happen. But how can we incorporate this discussion, including in this yearly event? We need to incorporate two important themes. Northeastern region cannot become a simple green energy exporter, whether it be to Brazil or to other countries. We need to add value to the production of energies. The trajectory that is happening, for example, with the solar energy production sector cannot happen, where we invest billions and a good part of that funding is actually taken abroad. It's not even to other regions of Brazil, it's to to abroad. So we need to be careful, for example, in the development of the hydrogen industry, in the nationalization of this chain. Not only equipment, we're talking about hydrogen production, but we need to discuss electrolyzer production, equipment production. We cannot be dependent on all of this technology that is coming from other countries. So that's our first worry. We need to focus on our chain so that we are not mere cheap commodity producers for green energy. But there's another relevant theme. And if you saw a Folha yesterday, you saw a full page for discussion. Energy transition in the northeastern region needs to be inclusive. We cannot have equipment facilities for huge wind and solar production plants without benefiting the local communities. The communities are feeling this deficit. The sector needs to think in the local impact that goes beyond environmental compensations, because environmental compensations, they're mandatory, but we need investments in this energy transition that so that it is a just transition and an inclusive transition. So the local communities receiving great investments, huge investments in wind and solar energy production, they need to receive other benefits, or else the energy transition that we are going to promote is going to be for the world, for Brazil, but not for our economy. We will continue poor. So we need to incorporate in this discussion not only energy production per se, not just financing either. We need to incorporate discussions of production chains and economic and social inclusions in a transition that is therefore just and inclusive. Well, everyone, just to wrap up our session, I would like to thank everyone for this rich discussion and place Caixa at the disposal of everyone and say that we are new in many products, in new businesses. For example, the capital markets. We have been acting for about 2.5 years. We have a considerable position in Ambima. So pressure us. Your pressure improves our services. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone. With this, we finish our panel with a series of information that will provide the appropriate financial support to overcome barriers that limit the development of our country. With the participation of all agents involved, we are able to thrust the development of our country and ensure an energy transition that is just and inclusive. Thank you so much. Thank you for conducting our panel so well. Thank you to our speakers, Carlos Antônio Costa, Guilherme, Rony Peterson. I ask that you come forward here to the center of the stage so we can record our official picture. Thank you so much for the important reflections and debates brought by you to this panel. And before we move on, I just wanted to say that sustainability is a value and a commitment of our FIEC Summit, and that is why we are holding a series of initiatives to decrease our CO2 emissions, CO2 footprint. We are promoting positive socio-environmental impact. We are also decreasing the CO2 footprint that will be neutralized through planting native vegetation of the Caatinga. This is an initiative of Caatinga Association and Verde Mares Sustentáveis. And here we are at our last panel of the first day with an important theme that will bring other information and reflections that are extremely relevant to our audience. Our theme is generation, transmission, and storage of energy. Energy generation and storage. Let's move on to our panel. I want to invite up our moderator, Mr. Luis Carlos Queiroz, President of CG Energia. I would also like to invite our speakers, Mrs. Albia Dunham, CEO of Abeólica, Brazilian Association of Wind Energy and New Technology. Mr. Ítalo Tadeu de Carvalho Freitas Filho, Vice President of Marketing and Energy Solutions at Eletrobras. And Mrs. Marília Rabassa, Coordinator of Absolar's Green Hydrogen Working Group. Also from Absolar, Brazilian Association of Wind Energy and New Technology. I want to invite Mr. Luis Carlos. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon to all of those present. It's an honor to be here as moderator of this very important panel, as the president of CG Energia. The representativity of the energy generation of Ceará. We have here Abeólica, Eletrobras. It's simply fantastic to be here. Abeólica, Absolar, Marília. Such a rich panel talking about this important moment of generating energy and green hydrogen here in Ceará. I was sitting over there just remembering that we had a corporate mission about two years ago in London. We called it Ceará Day, and we were talking about hydrogen. And at the time, BP, who now has a plant here in Ceará, the event was Ceará Day, and it talked about the investments in green hydrogen by the state of Ceará, and it seems so far away. And 2 years later, what we see is the materialization. And last Friday, we signed the legal framework for green hydrogen. And me, as a Ceará citizen, I saw this project from its inception, all the wind energy projects 25 years ago. It's such an honor to be here right now, talking with all of you. I'm not going to go on too much. I would like to say hello to all the women through my friend Laizérida, Mônica. It's such a pleasure to see you. Elbia, I would like to begin with you. The theme, the floor is yours. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I have been taking part in this event for a few years now, but always online, especially due to the pandemic. And I think last time I wasn't in Brazil, but I did take part in it. I was in Portugal, actually. I just remembered. And I am very happy to be here in person with my colleagues at this panel. It's a huge pleasure to return, since I was here on Friday with Transmissão from our hydrogen law project bill, which is now a law. Last year, I had the pleasure of bumping into Mônica at an event. Ceará is on, and so are we. I see Jurandir Picasso, feel welcomed by me. You guys are really, really. Uh, you don't stop, do you? I was talking to a reporter from Diário do Nordeste, this issue of the leadership within wind energy that the state needs to restart. Our main addressments for this theme, I think we can talk about that really quickly. And Jen, I don't really use PowerPoint anymore, so this was an exception because there are a few numbers that I want to present, but especially a few words that are going to connect today with tomorrow, which is literally tomorrow in this case. So I would like to use some data to talk about that. Energy generation and storage, these two things are very connected and are increasingly becoming more important. They're gaining importance. For us, for those of us who have been in the energy sector for 20 years or more, it's very impressive how in the last few years, Brazil's logic has flipped. Brazil used to be very worried about how to offer energy. The great challenge the country had was in offering this energy, and now it's in demanding the energy. And this demand is generated due to an important issue because way back when we decided to discuss renewable energy, there was a sentence I used to say that was, while the rest of the world is very worried about managing the scarcity of renewable resources for the production of energy and promoting energy transition and promoting economic transition from a high carbon to a low carbon economy, Brazil has the challenge of managing abundance. And managing abundance can be even harder than managing scarcity if you're not mindful. So I think it's really important for us to remember that despite having a lot of potential and resources, what I have been bringing in terms of key elements to this is debate is let's transform potentiality to reality because I can't keep on waiting. We are all anxious. Why? Because we know that if we don't actually lead and do this in a fast way, we can lose this race. Because other countries, despite not having the resources, the abundant resources that we have, competitivity, they have treasury resources to finance their projects. Look at the United States, look at Europe, you look at China, and nobody here is ready to compete with China. We need to establish partnerships with them, right? Partnerships with the US, partnerships with Europe. Brazil is a partnering country, and that's a differential that we have to attract investments. So this is what I'm going to talk about, given the several things. First of all, ABEOLICA, Brazilian Association of Wind Energy and New Technology, onshore, offshore. Among them, we have hydrogen and storage. We relaunched our brand in 2022 to be able to strongly position the name offshore and strongly include storage and hydrogen. And let it be known, our point of view on hydrogen is as a client. Italu is my client. I want to provide energy, clean, sustainable wind energy. So that's what I have to think about, the logic of those I am serving and of the several investors and potential investors, of course. So that's how I see the world. That is my point of view. And of course, I want to produce hydrogen with wind energy. So I will partner with solar eventually and here and there because, of course, with this change, we had an average of 90, 100 associates, and now we have about 150 exactly due to this point of view, the same point of view of the fertilizer, which is a hydrogen derivative. And talking about wind energy and world and global scenario. In the year of, we reached 1 terawatt of installed capacity. You can see here onshore wind energy and the offshore blue energy in blue arising, growing as of 2014. That is the global scenario of wind energy around the world. We installed 16 point something gigawatts worldwide. Brazil was the third country that most invested in wind energy last year. First China, second United States, and Brazil is already the sixth country in installed capacity of wind energy. And Brazil is beginning to develop its offshore wind energy projects. And last year, we hit a record of installed capacity, a record that was beaten against the 4.02 record of the year prior, which also beat the year before that. So a exponential growth of Brazil, but it will now undergo an inflection in 2024 given the crisis that you have been observing. Our matrix is super clean. Everybody has talked about that. Wind energy is the second great source of energy. I'm talking about the national interconnected system, and wind energy is the second largest source. When we talk about distributed energy, we're talking about something else. The energy matrix is also super sustainable, 47% renewable, 53% non-renewable, and we have a few things to get done here. The offshore project, we have 234 gigawatts of licensing requests before IBAMA. So we need to rush to get this offshore wind project approved. And that's why I'm going to Brasilia immediately so we can approve it. It's there, it's in the agenda. Let's see. These offshore wind projects will only actually be built once the ocean concession auction is completed. And this auction will only take place once the law is approved and regulated by the EME, and then we might be talking about next year. So the offshore wind energy will only be contracted and built after 3 years from the auction because viability studies are needed, and we're talking about 2030, 2031. But Elbia, isn't there a crisis? There's no room for offshore right now. No, today we don't, but tomorrow morning we will. So we have to work thinking strategically, and that is our line of thought. And then we are able to see several opportunities. What are we seeing right now? As I like to say in my post, hashtag right now. Right now, we see hydrogen with contracts being signed a lot because due to everyone here in Ceará who just keep on going and never stop, and other states as well, Piauí, Rio Grande do Norte. It's great to see everything that's happening. And we have this huge opportunity for decarbonizing the economy, which is the main point. We also have investments in wind energy and solar energy. I can see the time. I promise I'll finish shortly. But what's important? What is the message that we need to leave for you? We are working today thinking about decarbonizing the economy, thinking about actually placing the country in a position that it can potentially occupy and that it deserves to occupy. And we are right on the verge of getting there. We need the signed contract. And Fernanda says, I want more than that. I want to see invoices for hydrogen and for all the other products involved. But we have other plans, and what are we seeing today? We see people being fired, factories are empty, and for urgent measures, we see hydrogen departing from the place of expectation to the possibility of data centers, immediate demand. There are agreements being set in place. Journalists want me to open my big mouth. I will not. So we are going to have immediate demand with the data centers. We are going to have strong demands with power shoring, of attracting factories to Brazil, attracting plants from several economic sectors. Data centers are one of them, but we can also bring others to produce in Brazil. I had a colleague that was very worried that Brazil will not be a mere exporter. There's no way it can be anymore, and I'll tell you why. If Brazil decided to simply export hydrogen, Brazil would already not be a mere exporter. You know why? Because 80% of a wind generator is produced in Brazil. So if you buy wind energy to produce hydrogen right there, you have a series of things that will be purchased. Not to mention the hydrogen chain, production chain. So there's no way for Brazil to take a submissive role in these events because we have a huge, huge technology nucleus here in Brazil that involves all parts of the production. And we are fighting further for this sector in terms of financing. I, for example, am talking to banks, and we are going to bring value to this. And we need to know that we have to move on to hydrogen with competitiveness. Even if we do need to export, we need to leverage the first buyers, those so-called off-takers. So we need a strategic view. We need to build today what we want tomorrow, strategically. That's what I wanted to say. Helbia, thank you so much. You opened a horizon in terms of offshore, and I agree with you. Down to the dot, I was talking to Carlos Prado. Congratulations for this event. This event its quality and grandiosity is incredible. We have so many speakers taking part here in this densely rich moment. I agree with you, Albia. I agree with Carlos Prado. Where there is a need to scale, it is fundamental for the success of hydrogen and will most certainly change not only the economic profile of Brazil and the state of Ceará, but also the social profile, which most certainly the wind sector and renewable sector will also be transformed where this equipment is installed. But let's move on to our next speaker, Ítalo. Ítalo was also talking to Carlos Prado, and Ítalo is responsible for one of the largest batteries in the world. He's responsible for. We have been working for Chesf, for Eletrobras, and you guys are really a role model that brings Brazil pride. And there is a lot of history there in interconnecting wind energy plants and solar energy plants. I don't have a presentation, so I am just going to use a little bit of what Elbia presented. Thank you for the for having me here at FIAC Summit. It's my third participation, and my role here today is representing Eletrobras. Now, just talking about numbers really quickly, I think a lot of you know Eletrobras, but we don't have the details of numbers from Eletrobras, and the company is the largest one of the energy sector in the South Hemisphere, with an installed capacity of 36 gigawatts, and a lot of people say that they are the largest sustainable company, and it's because they don't know Eletrobras. When anybody tells me you don't reach 43 gigawatts, we do. We're Brazil. So we have enough transmission lines to go around the world 4 times. Over 400 substations around Brazil. It is a huge company, no doubt, and that is now preparing for a new phase. And this phase is the energy transformation, which, through the competence of those involved, was built throughout 60 years. Eletrobras, 60 years, Eletronorte, 50 years, Furnas. And all of these have together been building something that they saw as a renewable country. In the 70s, a lot of our energy production plants, some that were older, like Paulo Afonso. In the 90s, we had others, Tucuruí, for example. But anyway, what is Eletrobras for the future? It is a company that will take part in the energy transition. And Eletrobras also has wind energy. We are building a 300 megawatt park plant. It is going to be concluded until the end of the year. It will be operational with 300 megawatts. But for the future, it wants to participate in the energy transition. It wants to take part in the hydrogen market, and it brings a differential because the world sees and seeks renewables. For you to be able to produce low carbon renewable hydrogen at a competitive cost, you need renewable energy 24/7. And one of the few places that provide this is Brazil. And one of the only companies that do this at a competitive cost is named Eletrobras. But why? Because you need a high rate for the electrolyzer. The electrolyzer cannot be going off, it cannot be turning off and on the entire time, and you need to produce huge amounts of hydrogen so you can sell huge amounts of hydrogen. So you need energy 24/7. You can build this with several combinations, wind and solar, hydroelectric and battery, sure. But there's a term called competitiveness. So we need to be able to reach something that resembles this characteristic. Now, we are a completely connected and interconnected country. And today, the big problem in the world is transmission. Transmission is the largest problem, the most significant issue that we face. In Germany, there's a place, and others, in Texas, you have an area with more wind, others with more sun, and you need to bring the energy generated to the consumers. And this place of consumption is usually far away from where it is generated. So just so you can have an idea, high power transmission. Until the end of the years 2010, there were about 5 projects in the world, and now we have over 70 projects being implemented. What was the first one? Itaipu, São Paulo. It's the largest one in the world and the great symbol Today we have 70. Production is always to the brink. To ask for equipment for this high power production, it takes years to get. So Brazil is already interconnected, and that's an advantage for us. Brazil has been launching auctions, transmission auctions, in the last 3 years. The last auction, Eletrobras was awarded. We were awarded a huge line, an investment over 1.5 billion reais in other places too, like Bahia, Minas Gerais. And the intention is exactly to decrease the bottlenecks, the containments. The interruptions in transmission lines due to solar and wind energy. We want to end that. The country needs to implement a plan for the minimum conditions needed for a hydrogen plant that consumes 4 gigas, 5 gigas. It's not just I have here in this substation the capacity for 3 gigas in that substation, but you have to analyze the entire network to see if your system is able to cope with this 2, 3, 4 giga consumption. Energetically speaking, in 2028, Eletrobras will have 13 gigawatts on the free market, the energy free market. That's almost an Itaipu. So anybody can arrive and say, I want to place a hydrogen plant of 3 giga, 24/7, renewable. No problem. Just sign here. Accept the price, sign the contract. You can go, no construction, no nothing. You can leave with your hydrogen plant, air conditioning, electric windows, just like a brand new car. So the only person capable of doing that is Brazil and Eletrobras. So there are a few challenges for which we need to plan, and it has to be a plan focused on solving problems. There are some issues that are still open and they need to be terminated in terms of regulation, in terms of the plants. It's not easy. It's a very intermittent system. You need batteries, no matter how, lithium, pump storage, hydroelectric reservoirs. Something that they said was so difficult to bring down, I suggest that you read about it. In Caizu, which is from California, take a look at what happened in the last 120 days. California is that is completely decimating the pack curve simply by rearranging some items in their grid. So Caizu is actually managing to control the famous back curve. If you're interested, access Caizu, follow the daily chart. It's so impressive what they're getting done down there. There's nothing like needing to do something to get it done. And here in Brazil, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not like I'm going to come here and the first 1 or 2 giga, maybe the system will adapt, but from there on, I'm not really sure about the numbers. The system will need to be revised and reviewed and planned upon to be able to cope both with the offer and the demand. And that's where the planner comes in, the financing system comes in, the regulator comes in, so that we can align everything and we can tell the world and tell anybody who needs to that you can bring your green steel plant, you can bring your ammonia plant, you can bring your fertilizer plant, anything that is connected to the green industry. It's not an easy deal. There is a lot to get through, but I'm sure we can make it. Thank you, Italu, for this tip about the back curve. I saw the World Health Organization come to life, and we have no idea how important it is. We need to know cargo dispatch and the need, and it's such a beautiful result that's coming about. Now I'm going to grant the floor to Marilia from Abisola, who has been revolutionizing her field. Please send my... The floor is yours. It's a pleasure to be here, talking to everyone here, but especially as a representative of the electrical sector. And let's not forget that for the green hydrogen sector to be a real thing, we need storage, transmission, and I'm going to talk a little bit about all of that so that we can develop an overview. I am the coordinator of Abisola Hydrogen, and at Abisola we promote the photovoltaic sector for energy storage and green hydrogen. Here, green hydrogen is also a client market of us. As was said, they're going to consume our energy, and we follow up with the advance of this market in Brazil, and we try to serve as a place of encounter. We are present in 26 states with national and international company. We have over 600 associates at Abisola today, between distributed and large-size products. What are the benefits of photovoltaic solar energy in Brazil? From its inception in the last years, it had meteoric ascension. I'm going to talk about that in the next slides. But it was we saw over 200 billion in investment in this segment and more than 44 giga in solar energy, operational energy, 1.3 million new job positions, and almost 57 million tons of CO2 avoided. And that means over 64 billion in tax collection for the public, for the government here in Brazil. And we talked about and saw over this afternoon several slides talking about the participation in the energy matrix. Here we put together the distributed and centralized matrix, and we bring solar photovoltaic energy as the second largest one, followed by wind energy and hydric, which is majority here in our system, which will altogether bring energy to the hydrogen market. What I find very interesting, and I'm going to pause this slide a little bit and then talk about the future, is that we have a situation that is very atypical in the Brazilian market in the energy sector. First thing, if Brazil reaches the estimated potential for green hydrogen, this matrix until 2040, it's going to double. So the first thing that I would say is that there is space for all sources and all technologies. And we will need to walk together more and more so that we can deliver the variability that this sector needs. But as we are today, the matrix, the power outages are more frequent by the minute. So the challenge here for us to be able to meet the market, the green hydrogen market, is not just generate, because that we have in abundance. We have wind, water, sun. We also need transmission, efficient transmission that is that can provide the correct outflow for the energy of the Northeast can provide to Brazil for the green hydrogen market. So that's the first challenge that I would like to underscore. And what will this energy matrix look like in the future? We have a projection here from the Bloomberg NEF for the Brazilian electric matrix in 2050, with a huge growth of photovoltaic solar energy, whose cost for implementation has been decreasing exponentially. And also, together with the hydroelectric and other sources, we will have a more and more renewable, an increasingly renewable matrix. And that's what's going to support the hydrogen market. Talking about photovoltaic solar energy, we had a boom in that area. We had a learning curve. We had equipment whose costs decreased. And talking about 2020 to today, there was a huge growth. You can see it here. Today we have about 30 gigawatts of distributed solar generated. And we also bring the consumer profile here. Majoritively, we have residential consumers, which is a different market from the one that we are discussing here, which is a large scale for green hydrogen. When we talk about solar photovoltaic, we have a potential for the adaptation. Basically, sun shines throughout all states of Brazil. So we have a huge concentration in Minas Gerais, but next comes Bahia, Piauí, our dear Ceará, and a ranking of centralized photovoltaic production. It's the great plants that are going to meet the needs of green ammonia and green hydrogen being developed here in Brazil. When we talk about Abysolar, we need to remember there are new technologies that are synergetic with the generation of photovoltaic solar energy. And here I would like to point out two. In addition to hydrogen, we have the storage of electric energy. And this storage, as Italu reminded us, is a technology, that very promising technology, because it's already a reality in other places. And it's a reminder for us, a way for us to work with variability and intermittence of renewable resources, and also bottlenecks of the transmission system that we have currently. So the inclusion of electrical energy storage in auctions for capacity. So approving this in lithium batteries and other technologies that are interesting to use, it's imperative for us to be able to boost this market. Talk about taxes that apply to the sector is also very important, and incentivized. Our role is to promote incentives, tax incentives in the state and federal scope. We have been working together with as other initiatives to develop this market. We also incentivize policies for long-term demand. And here, this is essential. We need the demand for this hydrogen. We need to be able to unlock hydrogen consumption, both domestically and internationally. That's our work here at Abysolar as well, to foster greater financing capacity. which was another victory that was already approved in the framework. Moving on a little bit more, I would like to talk a bit about the potential that we have for hydrogen in Brazil. And we talk a lot about exporting because I think that would be the dream, the myth, to export our energy all over the world since we are so blessed with natural resources and a vast territory. Exporting our energy to the entire world through the hydrogen as a vector is something that would boost this sector significantly. But I want to remind everyone that we have a domestic market with an incredible potential. And this market, we have a ladder here. Rodrigo also talked about this in his slides. His slide was a little bit different from this, but talks about the unavoidable. And what is unavoidable is the substitution replacement of gray hydrogen for green hydrogen, for example. Our agro sector, fertilizer sector, the Brazilian sector, imports over 80% of its fertilizers. And we are the market that in Brazil, we basically feed the world or part of it. So producing fertilizers in Brazil can be our savior both for our marketing balance or equilibrium, but also green ammonia and green hydrogen. So I think we have to think of this with care. So we need to think about our domestic market for fertilizer, steel, mining, which are markets that are very promising. And I would also like to talk about the Brazilian Pact for Renewable Hydrogen, which was we got together, Absolar, Abeólica, Abiogás, and AHK with the state of Ceará so that we could contribute to the legal framework, develop the market and application of this hydrogen, promote social and economic items, disseminate the opportunities here in Brazil, and the associations also. By coming together, we want to incentivize the growth of the market. And I would like to talk about our next things that are coming up at Abisala. I'm available to talk if you desire. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marilia. Such a wonderful presentation. Due to our restricted time, we have another 15 minutes, and of those 15 minutes, I would like to divide this time among you if you want to ask questions or make final considerations. Thank you. I just wanted to take the moment to make a few comments on what has already been discussed by my colleagues in this panel. First of all, I remembered while Italu was speaking that when I began studying hydrogen, it was more or less in 2019, 2020, and Italu was one of the first people that I sought out. And I think people thought we were crazy. I talked about hydrogen at a meeting one day, and everybody was like, what's she talking about? So it seemed like we had lost our minds, but nowadays we're all together in the same place. We're all crazy. And I honestly have never seen a law be passed so fast as hydrogen's case. As I said in the beginning, I have a 24-year career in this industry, and I have gone through the passing of several laws, and the speed that we are witnessing is due to the strength that we have together. Remember, we brought together the pact. André, who is our head of hydrogen, he worked intensively for this pact, and it's so good to see that when we come together and we work together, we are able to achieve great results, and we're able to see that in our matrix. Brazil will not be able to be what we are saying we can potentially be if we physically do not complement the production, thinking about it about it working 24/7 a day. That's our differential. We need to work together. I was with Monica at an event, and we were talking about the differential of being able to produce hydrogen through this partnership. And Brazil has been working, and we noticed the EPE efforts, and we need to think about the transition to offshore as well. It's a moment that is very demanding, and it's joint efforts. Everyone needs to get involved, and each person needs to bring their experience. Each agency needs to do the same. We discuss energy industry in Brazil. We discuss everything, all elements involved, because we want to have an energy industry in Brazil that involves all sources, including thermal energy. So we need to understand that, and that's something that I emphasize, this joint effort. But everything I've done until today has been something kind of crazy. In 2004, when we were talking about offshore, people thought I was crazy, and then hydrogen offshore, they thought I was crazy again, and every single one of these ideas has been a success. So I'm very happy to be here. You are very visionary, you are innovative in Ceará. Ceará began with wind energy. I think we have to keep moving forward together, just as we have been doing so far, and I'm pretty sure that very briefly we will be able to reap what we have been sowing. She talks with such confidence. You can see fire. Half of me is passion and the other half as well. I think you have been counting these 24 years from the time you were an intern, because it has to be. Let's go, Ítalo. I have a story with hydrogen that is a little bit longer than hers. I was with Daniel from Haydn, and he was completing his master's and his PhD. And Daniel was also my classroom colleague. And this was in 2001. We talked about hydrogen. And the first hydrogen project was to using it secondarily for energy storage and to release the energy at peak times. And this was something we thought about among professors and students. So this was 2001. And everything we talked about was way into the future. And then all of a sudden in 2019, whoa, it came to life. So it's a huge challenge. I just want to emphasize that we have just gone through the hype, but we need to stand firm regarding hydrogen. A lot of projects popped up, especially in terms of offers around the world. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United States, Europe, many, many, many projects. And a lot of huge companies, including recharging stations and etc. And now we see how every new technology incurs a small retraction. Some projects didn't move forward. Some projects weren't economically feasible. But, and here come the haters using a more modern word. If you go to LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of haters saying, "See, I told you so." It's no good. It's not interesting. It's unfeasible. And then, as Alba said, we have to say, no, wait a minute. If you think that, then give me an alternative. Because we are moving to hydrogen for a reason. If not, we would remain with oil. And what is that reason? Our planet. If the planet wasn't complaining, we wouldn't be doing any of this. Maybe we'd still be in the oil and gas industry. So there's a reason, and this reason is the planet. We have to pay a price to have this. So what I mean is, don't buckle. We have to show that technically Brazil is the country that is going to show that hydrogen is technically feasible. That is my message. Excellent words, Italu. I think that's an interesting point for us to remember the objective of being here, which is to decarbonize the world, not just Brazilian economy, but the world as a whole. And what's interesting is that historically we have a lot of projects that were already announced, and historically 5% of projects announced are reaching an investment decision, that it's okay, that it's feasible, let's advance. But this historically has also been growing. 2-3 years ago, the number was even lower. So we're talking about a technology on this scale that is being tested right now, a market that is developing right now. And the more we talk about hydrogen, plus there's more research, there's more investment, and all of this makes technology, the cost of technology, come down over time. And I think that's something important to consider when we begin feeling like we should be on another level right now. I think we're at the right level. We are advancing as we should, and we're going to be able to show that Brazil has an inherent talent for producing green hydrogen and to revolutionize our economy. I think that is the vision that we have for Brazil. It's going to all make sense. We're going to verticalize this chain internally. And that is our expectation and our hope. And I am very sure that it will become a concrete realization. I am an economist. And when I came to the market, I felt like I didn't belong really. And then I saw those engineers wearing a helmet, and I did a graduate course in engineering, and I am now doing a graduate program in renewable energy, and I constantly see new things coming about. I see others that are changing their fields to discuss this sector, and it's a new industry that is arising. I see women coming into the energy sector. And of course, there are those that were from energy and are going into finances. And so many women, fantastic women. But anyway, I am flattered to be here at this panel, seeing the transformation that the energy is bringing to the economy, to society, and helping construct a new planet with the responsibility of changing and transforming the matrix and decarbonizing the world. So I can't really take too long anymore. I would like to wish everyone a wonderful night. And remember, tomorrow at 9, be here again. Surely tomorrow will be even better than today. Have a great afternoon and a good night. Thank you, my dear Luis Carlos Queiroz, President of Ciência Ceará. To all of those present, let's take our picture here. And since our Luis Carlos has already announced, we have reached the end of our first day of the FIEC Summit 2024, this event that is bringing the state of the art in terms of research, production, use, logistics, transports, technologies involving the implementation of the green hydrogen matrix, a reality in terms of renewable energy energy sources. We would like to thank everyone for coming to the Centro de Eventos, and I would like to invite you to return to the activities tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the same auditorium. Actually, in all three of them, we will have simultaneous translation in the plenary. We will have thematic themes in the other auditoriums with specialization in green hydrogen. Thank you once again. Good evening. Rest well. See you tomorrow, FIEC Summit 2024.
Em uma região diferente como a nossa, existe um banco diferente de todos os outros. O Banco do Microcrédito, que produz, orienta e gera renda. O Banco da Agricultura Familiar, que cuida e alimenta toda uma nação. Do agronegócio, que fortalece o PIB e exporta para o mundo. O Banco das Pequenas, Médias e Grandes Empresas, que empregam e fazem a economia girar. O Banco da Infraestrutura, que constrói pontes e abre caminhos. Da energia limpa, que protege o futuro do planeta. Da inovação, que cria soluções para o dia a dia. O Banco da Cultura, viva, dinâmica, pulsante. Da geração de renda, com 58 bilhões de reais investidos, que influenciaram a geração de milhões de empregos. Isso é bom para todo mundo. Eleito Banco de Desenvolvimento do Ano da América Latina. Não é qualquer banco, é o Banco do Nordeste. Governo Federal.
Brasil.
Meu Brasil brasileiro.
Vou cantar-te nos meus versos.
Brasil verde que dá.
Para o mundo se admirar.
O Brasil do meu amor.
Terra de nosso Senhor.
Brasil, pra mim.
Pra mim.
Pra mim.
Brasil.
O Brasil que ama sua terra, sua cultura, sua natureza, sua gente, voltou. Voltou para cuidar e fazer mais, muito mais para cada brasileiro e brasileira, unindo cuidado e crescimento, pessoas e desenvolvimento, respeito aqui dentro e lá fora. O Brasil voltou para fazer mais por nossa gente. Brasil, união e reconstrução.
A CAGES trabalha para atender a mais de 5 milhões de cearenses, sempre pensando no melhor para você. Porque aqui somos gente que atende gente, que se importa com o bem-estar de todos, valorizando o nosso maior bem, a vida. E a nossa forma de fazer isso é cuidando da sua saúde através do tratamento de água, é ampliando a rede de abastecimento e esgotamento sanitário e reafirmando nossos processos de qualidade. É promovendo a sustentabilidade econômica, social e ambiental no Ceará. Sempre trabalhando para garantir água tratada, esgotamento sanitário, saúde e qualidade de vida para todos. Somos milhares de colaboradores trabalhando para cada vez mais conquistar a confiança dos cearenses. Porque, pra gente, garantir o essencial para a vida é cuidar de você. CAGES, presente na sua vida.
Vem na Caixa, vem! Muitas vantagens, facilidades, traga sua conta, abra um sorriso que tem. Vem na Caixa, vem! Crédito fácil, tem muito prazo e condições diferenciadas. Vem, vem! Vem na Caixa, vem!
Já sabe, né? Tudo que você precisa tem na Caixa. Vem!
The world needs real zero, and Fortescue Zero is delivering it. Fortescue Zero, the green technologies accelerating commercial decarbonisation rapidly profitably and globally. Not near zero, not net zero. Fortescue Zero.